Standing outside Dominic Castellano's office, Isabella Romano pressed one trembling hand against her still flat stomach as his voice cut through the door like a blade. Children? I'll never have them. They're nothing but weakness waiting to be exploited. The word shattered something vital inside her chest. For 3 months, she had carried his secret, their child growing beneath her heart, while she navigated the dangerous world of New York's most feared mafia boss. But now she understood the truth. She was alone. And tonight, before he could discover what she'd hidden, Isabella Romano would disappear forever. If you're hooked already, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Manhattan skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Dominic Castellano's penthouse office, each light a reminder of the empire he controlled with an iron fist. Isabella Romano had walked these halls for 8 months as his executive assistant, maintaining the perfect facade of professionalism while her heart betrayed her with every stolen glance. She knew the rules. Everyone who worked for Dominic Castellano knew the rules. Keep your head down. Do your job. Never ask questions about the meetings that happened behind closed doors or the men who left his office with fear etched into their features. But rules had a way of crumbling when Dominic Castellano turned his full attention on you. It started 6 months ago with a late-night work session, rain hammering against the windows as they reviewed acquisition documents for a shipping company everyone knew was a front for moving goods the law would never approve. Isabella had been reaching for a file when Dominic's hand covered hers, his touch sending electricity racing up her arm. "You're not afraid of me," he had said, his dark eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Everyone else in this building looks at me like I'm a monster waiting to strike, but not you." "Should I be afraid?" Isabella had asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Dominic's smile had been slow, dangerous, devastating. Probably. But he hadn't let go of her hand. And when he'd kissed her that night, tasting of expensive whiskey and something darker, something forbidden, Isabella had kissed him back with a hunger that surprised them both. Their relationship became a secret wrapped in shadows, stolen moments between meetings and late nights when the rest of his staff had gone home. Dominic was careful, obsessively so. No public appearances together, no traces that could be followed. Isabella understood why. In his world, anything you loved became a target. Weakness meant death. She told herself it was enough, that these hidden hours were all she could expect from a man who commanded an empire built on fear and blood. She never asked for more, never pushed for promises he couldn't make. Then came the morning she'd thrown up in the executive bathroom, her hands shaking as she stared at the positive pregnancy test. 3 months gone. 3 months of carrying Dominic's child while navigating board meetings and contract negotiations, while smiling politely at the men who would kill her without hesitation if they knew she carried the heir to Dominic Castellano's empire. For 2 weeks, Isabella had kept the secret locked tight in her chest, trying to find the right moment to tell him. But the right moment never came. Dominic was in the middle of a territorial dispute with the Moretti family, his attention consumed by strategy sessions and tense negotiations that sometimes ended with gunfire echoing through the night. She had decided to wait until things calmed down, until she could catch him in one of those rare, quiet moments when the hardness in his eyes softened just slightly, when he looked at her like she was something precious, instead of just another piece on his chessboard. But today, standing outside his office with her hand pressed against her stomach, Isabella learned that some moments of truth arrived whether you were ready or not. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, she could see Dominic seated behind his massive mahogany desk, his second-in-command Marco standing across from him. They were discussing business, the usual topics of territory, shipments, and payment schedules. Isabella had been about to knock to deliver the quarterly reports Dominic had requested when Marco's next words froze her in place. "Your cousin called again," Marco said, his tone carefully neutral, "asking when you're going to settle down, give the family an heir. He thinks it's time." Dominic's laugh was cold, sharp enough to cut. "My cousin can mind his own damn business. I've told him 100 times, I'm not interested in playing happy family. He thinks it would strengthen your position," Marco pressed. "A wife, children, it shows stability. Makes you look less Less what? Dominic's voice dropped to that dangerous quiet that made seasoned criminals flinch. Less ruthless? Less effective? Tell me, Marco, exactly how does saddling myself with a family make me stronger? Marco shifted his weight, uncomfortable. It's tradition. My father's dead. Dominic cut him off with brutal efficiency. Killed by men who used his family against him. They took my mother hostage, Marco, put a gun to her head and forced him to kneel. That's what family gets you in this business, a weakness your enemies can exploit. Isabella's hand tightened against her stomach, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. So when my cousin calls again, Dominic continued, his words precise and merciless, you tell him I've made my position clear. I will never have children. They're nothing but a liability, weakness waiting to be exploited by anyone smart enough to see the opportunity. A child would be a target with a bullseye painted on their back from the moment they drew their first breath. I won't create that vulnerability, not for tradition, not for anyone. The quarterly report slipped from Isabella's numb fingers, hitting the marble floor with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the terrible silence following Dominic's declaration. Through the gap in the door, she saw Dominic's head turn sharply toward the noise. Isabella didn't wait for him to investigate. She turned and walked away with measured steps that wanted desperately to become a run, her mind screaming with the implications of what she'd just heard. Every word had been a nail in the coffin of the fragile hope she'd been nursing for 2 weeks. I will never have children. They're nothing but a liability. She made it to the executive bathroom before the first sob tore from her throat. Isabella locked herself in a stall, pressing her fist against her mouth to muffle the sounds of her breaking heart. The child growing inside her, Dominic's child, would never be welcome, would never be anything but the weakness he despised, the liability he refused to create. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Dominic. Where are the Q3 reports? Isabella stared at the message through blurred vision, then typed back with shaking fingers. Dropped them, bringing a new copy. She couldn't do this. Couldn't walk back into that office and hand him papers while her world crumbled around her. Couldn't look into those dark eyes and pretend she hadn't heard him systematically destroy any future they might have had together. But she had to, just once more, because Isabella needed to see his face when she lied to it. 10 minutes later, after repairing her makeup and forcing her features into a mask of professional calm, Isabella knocked on Dominic's office door. Come in. He was alone now. Marco departed on whatever errand Dominic had assigned. The Manhattan skyline stretched behind him like a kingdom he'd conquered through blood and strategy. Dominic Castellano at 42 was devastatingly handsome in the way dangerous things often were, all sharp edges and controlled power wrapped in a custom Italian suit. His dark hair held just enough silver at the temples to add gravity, and those eyes could strip a person bare with a single glance. Right now, they were focused on Isabella with concern that felt like a knife twisting in her chest. Are you all right? Dominic asked, rising from his chair. You look pale. I'm fine. The lie tasted like ash. Just a headache. Here are your reports. She placed the folder on his desk, careful not to let their fingers touch. Dominic frowned, his sharp instincts clearly picking up on something wrong, but Isabella was already turning away. Wait. His voice stopped her at the door. Isabella. She turned back, forcing herself to meet his eyes one last time. This man who had touched her with such devastating tenderness in the darkness. This man whose child grew beneath her heart, while he sat there completely unaware, having just declared that child nothing but a weakness he would never willingly create. Yes, Mr. Castellano? The formal address made something flicker in his expression. Surprise, maybe hurt. They only used titles in front of others, maintaining the professional distance that protected them both. But Isabella needed that distance now more than ever. Are you sure you're all right? Dominic asked again, his tone softer now, edged with something that might have been worry. Isabella smiled, the expression feeling like her face might crack from the effort. Perfectly fine. Just tired. I think I'll take the rest of the day off if that's acceptable. She saw him hesitate, saw the war in his eyes between the boss who maintained strict control and the man who'd held her through countless nights. Finally, he nodded. Of course. Rest. We'll talk later. But there would be no later, Because Isabella Romano had made her decision standing outside his office, hearing him systematically destroy any hope she'd harbored for a future together. She would leave. Tonight. Before he could discover the truth about the life growing inside her. Before her child could become the weakness he despised, the liability he would view with resentment instead of love. The child deserved better than that. Deserved better than a father who saw them as a vulnerability to be avoided. "Thank you, Mr. Castellano," Isabella said quietly, "for everything." Something in her tone made Dominic's eyes narrow, his instincts clearly screaming warnings. He started to move around the desk. "Isabella," but she was already gone, closing the door softly behind her and walking toward an elevator that would carry her out of this building and out of Dominic Castellano's life forever. The apartment Isabella had been renting in Brooklyn was small but comfortable, a far cry from the luxury of Dominic's world, but paid for with her own salary rather than his dangerous money. She'd insisted on keeping it throughout their relationship, maintaining this small piece of independence, even when Dominic had offered, repeatedly, to set her up somewhere better. Now, as Isabella systematically packed her belongings into 3 suitcases, she was grateful for that stubborn independence. Grateful that this space was entirely hers, untainted by Dominic's resources or influence. She worked quickly, methodically, her mind shut down against the screaming emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. Clothes folded with precise corners, documents gathered and organized, her passport, birth certificate, the small amount of cash she'd saved, everything essential went into a leather bag that would stay within arm's reach. Isabella had always been a planner. Growing up poor in the Bronx had taught her to think 3 steps ahead, to always have an exit strategy. Even when she'd fallen into Dominic's bed, fallen into feelings she knew were dangerous, some part of her had kept a corner of her life separate, untouchable, ready for the day when this beautiful, terrible thing between them would inevitably end. She just hadn't expected it to end like this. Hadn't expected to be running not from danger or discovery, but from the simple truth that the man she loved would never want the child she carried. Her phone buzzed repeatedly throughout the evening, Dominic calling, texting, his messages growing increasingly concerned as she ignored each one. "Are you home? Call me. Isabella, you're worrying me. At least let me know you're safe." Each message made her heart clench, but Isabella deleted them all. She couldn't afford to waver. Couldn't afford to hear his voice and lose her resolve. By midnight, her apartment was empty except for the furniture that had come with the lease. Isabella stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking at the space where she'd imagined a different future. A future where maybe, somehow, she and Dominic could have made this work. But that future had died today outside his office, killed by words spoken in casual certainty. "I will never have children." Isabella placed her hand against her stomach, feeling the slight swell that would soon become impossible to hide. "It's just us now," she whispered to the life growing inside her. "But I promise you'll be wanted. I promise you'll be loved." The cab she'd called pulled up outside at 12:47 a.m. Isabella took one last look at the building, then climbed in with her suitcases. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Penn Station." She had a train ticket to Boston in her purse, purchased with cash earlier that afternoon. From Boston, she would go to Portland. From Portland, maybe Seattle. Far enough that Dominic's network would have trouble following, far enough that she could disappear into a new life. The city scrolled past the cab's windows, each familiar street a goodbye. Isabella pressed her forehead against the glass and let the tears come finally, silently, while the driver pretended not to notice. She was doing the right thing. For her child. For herself. Even if it felt like dying. Dominic Castellano stood in Isabella's empty apartment at 2 a.m., his phone pressed to his ear as Marco's voice delivered the news he'd been dreading. "The landlord says she turned in her keys 3 hours ago, paid through the end of the month and left. No forwarding address." "Find her." Dominic's voice was deadly calm, the tone that preceded violence. "I don't care what you have to do. Find her." "Boss, if she doesn't want to be found, then you make her want it." Dominic cut him off. "Pull traffic camera footage. Check train stations, bus terminals, airports. She has family in the Bronx. Send someone to watch them. I want to know where Isabella Romano went, and I want to know by morning." He ended the call and turned slowly in the empty apartment, trying to understand what had happened. This morning, Everything had been fine. Isabella had been her usual efficient self, bringing him coffee exactly how he liked it, organizing his schedule with the precision he'd come to depend on. Then something had changed. That moment in his office when she'd looked at him with such devastating sadness, calling him Mr. Castellano in a tone that felt like goodbye. What did I miss? Dominic prided himself on reading people, on seeing threats before they materialized and opportunities before they ripened. But with Isabella, he'd been blind, too close to see clearly, too invested to recognize the warning signs. His phone buzzed with a text from Marco. Checking stations now. No credit card activity since this afternoon. Of course not. Isabella was smart. Too smart to leave a trail he could follow. Dominic sank onto the couch she'd left behind, exhaustion pulling at him for the first time in years. He'd built an empire through ruthless efficiency and calculated risk. He controlled territory from Manhattan to New Jersey, commanded loyalty through fear and respect in equal measure. Men twice his age deferred to his judgment. Politicians returned his calls. Police looked the other way when his name came up. But none of that power meant anything if he couldn't find one woman who'd decided to disappear. Why did you run? The question haunted him as dawn broke over the city, painting the empty apartment in shades of gold and amber. Dominic had never felt more powerless in his life. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible suspicion was beginning to form. A memory of Isabella's hand pressed against her stomach when she'd thought he wasn't looking. The way she'd been pale and tired lately, the subtle changes he'd noticed but hadn't questioned. No, it couldn't be that. Could it? Dominic pulled out his phone and dialed his private doctor, a man who knew better than to ask questions or violate confidentiality. I need you to check something for me, he said when the doctor answered. Discreetly. Because if his suspicion was correct, if Isabella had left because she was carrying his child, then Dominic Castellano had made the biggest mistake of his life, and he had no idea how to fix it. 3 weeks later. Isabella watched the rain streak down the window of her rented room in Portland, one hand unconsciously rubbing the slight swell of her stomach. 4 months now. Soon she'd need looser clothes, need to start making plans for when the pregnancy became impossible to hide. She'd found work at a bookstore, paying cash under the table for an owner who didn't ask too many questions. The room she rented was small and cold, a far cry from the life she'd left behind, but it was safe, anonymous. Or at least she'd thought it was. The news alert on her phone made her blood run cold. Castellano Organization increases security measures. CEO, unavailable for comment. The article was brief, carefully worded to avoid anything actionable, but Isabella could read between the lines. Dominic was mobilizing resources, looking for something, or someone. Her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Isabella stared at it, her heart hammering. She changed her number the day she left New York, given it to exactly 3 people, her new landlord, her employer, and her mother, which meant whoever was calling had resources to track her down. The call went to voicemail. Isabella waited, then played the message with shaking hands. Isabella! Dominic's voice flooded through the speaker, and she nearly dropped the phone. I know you don't want to hear from me. I know you left for a reason, but please call me back. Whatever I did, whatever I said, we can fix it. Just tell me where you are. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something raw, almost broken. I'm sorry for whatever I did to make you leave. Just, please, let me know you're safe. The message ended. Isabella sat frozen, tears streaming down her face as Dominic's voice echoed in her mind. He sounded devastated, lost, like a man searching for something precious that had slipped through his fingers. But he didn't know about the baby. Didn't know that the weakness he despised was growing inside her with every passing day. Isabella deleted the message and turned off her phone. Some distances were too far to cross. Some words, once spoken, couldn't be taken back. And some children deserved fathers who wanted them from the very beginning, not men who would see them as liabilities, weaknesses waiting to be exploited, even if walking away felt like carving out her own heart. Mom, that's that. Dominic stared at his phone, willing it to ring, willing Isabella to call back to give him any sign that she was all right. Nothing. Marco knocked on his office door, entering with the caution of a man approaching a wounded animal. "Boss, we got something." Dominic's head snapped up. "Where?" "Security footage from Penn Station, the night she disappeared." Marco pulled up the video on his tablet. "We had to go through 3 weeks of recordings, but we found her." The video showed Isabella moving through the crowded station, 3 suitcases trailing behind her. She looked small, vulnerable in a way that made Dominic's chest tighten. She stopped at a ticket counter, exchanged cash for something, then disappeared into the crowd. "Where did she go?" Dominic demanded. "We're still tracking it, but boss," Marco hesitated, "there's something else. Something you need to see." He pulled up another image, this one from a different camera angle. Isabella standing in profile, her hand pressed against her stomach in a gesture that was becoming familiar from the footage they'd collected. But in this image, the angle of the camera caught something Marco's team had noticed in other footage too. A slight curve to Isabella's abdomen that hadn't been there 4 months ago. A telltale sign that Dominic had been too blind to see when she was standing right in front of him. "She's pregnant," Marco said quietly. "Our medical consultant estimates she's about 4 months along, which means the baby's mine." Dominic's voice came out strangled. "The baby's mine, and she left because..." The conversation with Marco 3 weeks ago came rushing back. Every word Dominic had spoken about children being liabilities, weaknesses, vulnerabilities he would never create. Every casual declaration that he would never have a family. And Isabella had been standing outside his door, listening to him systematically destroy any hope she might have had. "Oh God." Dominic sank into his chair, the full weight of his mistake crashing down on him. "She heard me. That day when you and I were talking about my cousin's suggestions, Isabella was outside and she heard everything I said." "Boss, she's carrying my child and she ran because she thought I would see the baby as a burden." Dominic's hands were shaking now, a tremor he couldn't control. "She thought I wouldn't want them." The irony was devastating. For 6 months, Dominic had been falling for Isabella Romano, had been fighting against feelings he'd sworn never to have again. He'd kept their relationship secret not because he was ashamed, but because in his world, anything you loved became a target. His father had taught him that lesson in blood. But in trying to protect Isabella by keeping her at a distance, by maintaining the facade of the ruthless businessman who needed nothing and no one, Dominic had driven her away when she needed him most, when their child needed him most. "Find her," Dominic said, his voice hard with determination. "Pull every resource we have. I don't care what it costs or who we have to pressure. I want Isabella Romano found, and I want it done yesterday." Because Dominic Castellano had just realized something that terrified him more than any enemy ever could. He was in love with a woman who was carrying his child, and he had no idea if he could convince her to come back. But he would try, even if it meant tearing down every wall he'd built around his heart and showing her the truth he'd been too afraid to admit. He loved her. He wanted their child. And he would spend the rest of his life proving it if she would just give him the chance. The hunt consumed Dominic in ways nothing else ever had. For 2 months, he threw every resource at his disposal into finding Isabella. Private investigators, tech experts who could track digital footprints that most people didn't even know they left, and contacts in cities across the country who owed him favors. The search became an obsession that ate at him during every waking moment and haunted his dreams when exhaustion finally dragged him under. Marco watched his boss unravel with growing concern. The man who had always been calculated, controlled, was making decisions driven by emotion rather than strategy. It was dangerous. In their world, emotion got you killed. "Boss, you need to sleep," Marco said one night, finding Dominic in his office at 3 in the morning, surrounded by reports and surveillance footage. "You've been at this for 18 hours straight." Dominic didn't look up from the security image he was examining, a blurry shot from a convenience store in Seattle that might have been Isabella, or might have been any dark-haired woman with similar features. "She's 5 months pregnant now, maybe 6. She needs prenatal care, vitamins, a doctor monitoring the baby's development. She's smart enough to take care of herself." "Is she?" Dominic's voice cracked slightly. "Is she smart enough, or is she so afraid of me finding her that she's avoiding hospitals, paying cash for everything and staying off the grid?" The question hung in the air between them. Marco had no answer because they both knew the truth. Isabella was exactly that smart, and exactly that afraid. "We'll find her," Marco said quietly. "The team in Portland reported a possible sighting yesterday. Dark hair, about the right age, working at a bookstore on the east side." Dominic's head snapped up, hope flaring in his exhausted eyes. "Send someone to confirm." But Marco, he stood, his expression hardening into the dangerous focus that had built his empire. "Tell them to observe only. Don't approach her. Don't scare her. If it's Isabella, I want to know immediately, and I'll handle it myself." Understood. But the Portland lead turned out to be another dead end. A woman with similar features, but the wrong eyes, the wrong walk, the wrong everything. Dominic received the news while in a meeting with the Moretti family, negotiating a truce that would have demanded his full attention under normal circumstances. Instead, he found himself agreeing to terms he would have fought against, just to end the meeting faster. "You're distracted," Vincent Moretti observed, his aged eyes sharp despite his 70 years. "Not like you, Castellano. What's got you twisted up?" Dominic considered lying, then realized he was too tired to maintain the facade. "Personal matters." Vincent's weathered face creased into something that might have been sympathy. "A woman?" "A woman I lost because I was too stupid to see what I had until she was gone." The old man nodded slowly, understanding passing between them despite decades of rivalry. "My Rosa left me once, back in the early days. Took our daughter and disappeared for 3 months because I'd said something cruel, something I didn't mean. Pride almost kept me from going after her." "What changed your mind?" "I realized that ruling an empire means nothing if you're sitting alone in an empty house at the end of the day." Vincent studied Dominic with an intensity that made him feel transparent. "Whatever you said, whatever you did, fix it. Because regret is a poison that kills slower than a bullet, but just as thoroughly." The words stayed with Dominic long after the meeting ended, echoing through his mind as he returned to his office and the endless search. Vincent Moretti had built a life with his Rosa, had raised children and grandchildren, had created something beyond money and power. Dominic wanted that with an ache that surprised him with its intensity. He wanted Isabella, wanted their child, wanted the future he'd been too afraid to imagine. His phone rang at midnight. Marco's voice was tight with controlled excitement. "We found her. Chicago. A clinic on the south side ran her ID for a prenatal appointment yesterday." Dominic was on his feet instantly, his exhaustion vanishing under a surge of adrenaline. "You're certain?" "The clinic requires identification for first visits. She used her real name, real social security number. Our contact in their records department confirmed it's her." "Address?" "Already sent to your phone. Boss, do you want backup?" Dominic considered the question while pulling on his jacket and checking the gun he always carried. "No, this is something I need to do alone." "She might run again." "Then I'll follow." Dominic's voice was calm, certain. "However long it takes, however far she goes, I'll follow. Because she's carrying my child and I'm in love with her. And those are two facts that aren't changing regardless of how much distance she puts between us." The admission hung in the air. Marco was silent for a long moment, then said quietly, "Good luck, boss." Dominic's private plane was fueled and ready within the hour. He spent the 3-hour flight to Chicago rehearsing what he would say, discarding every speech that felt too calculated, too much like a business negotiation. This wasn't a deal to be struck or a contract to be signed. This was his life, his future, his heart laid bare. The address Marco had provided led to a modest apartment building in a neighborhood that made Dominic's security instincts scream warnings. This was the kind of area where people minded their own business because getting involved meant trouble, where sirens were background noise and broken streetlights stayed broken. Isabella was living here, pregnant and alone, in a building with a broken security door and graffiti sprayed across the brick walls. The rage that swept through Dominic was cold and focused. She should have been in his penthouse, surrounded by security and comfort, eating organic food prepared by his private chef and sleeping in Egyptian cotton sheets. Instead, she was here, hiding from him, in a place that made his skin crawl with protective fury. He climbed the 3 flights of stairs to apartment 3C, his footsteps echoing in the narrow stairwell. Dominic raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What if she refused to open the door? What if she saw him through the peephole and called the police? What if she looked at him with the same devastation he'd seen in his office 2 months ago and told him to leave? Dominic knocked anyway. 3 firm raps that sounded too loud in the quiet hallway. Nothing. He knocked again. Isabella, I know you're in there, please. I just want to talk. Silence answered him. But Dominic could feel her presence on the other side of the door, could sense her fear and uncertainty as clearly as if she'd spoken. He pressed his palm against the worn wood, imagining he could feel her warmth through it. I'm not leaving, he said quietly. I'll stand here all night if that's what it takes. I'll come back every day until you talk to me. Because I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it. More silence. Then so faintly he almost missed it, Isabella's voice came through the door. Go away, Dominic. The sound of her voice after 2 months hit him like a physical blow. I can't do that. You have to. There's nothing here for you. You're there. That's everything. He heard her sharp intake of breath, heard what might have been a sob quickly stifled. You don't want this. You made that very clear. I was wrong. The words came out rough, scraped raw from his throat. Isabella, I was so wrong about everything, and I need to explain. Please, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I can't. Her voice broke. I can't do this with you. I can't let you back in just to... I love you. The confession exploded into the space between them. 3 words Dominic had never said to anyone except his mother before she died. 3 words he'd sworn he would never say because love was weakness, love was vulnerability, love got you killed. But standing in this dingy hallway, separated from the woman carrying his child by a door and 2 months of mistakes, Dominic finally understood what Vincent Moretti had tried to tell him. Power meant nothing without someone to share it with. An empire built on fear crumbled into dust when there was no one to pass it to. I love you, he said again, softer this time. I've loved you for months, maybe from the first moment you looked at me without fear in your eyes. And I was too much of a coward to admit it, too afraid of what it meant. But Isabella, I'm done being afraid. I'm done lying to myself about what I want. The lock clicked. The door opened a crack, and Dominic found himself looking into Isabella's face for the first time in 2 months. She'd changed. Lost weight everywhere except her stomach, which curved beneath an oversized sweater in an unmistakable swell. Her face was thinner, shadows beneath her eyes speaking of sleepless nights and worry. But she was still the most beautiful thing Dominic had ever seen. You shouldn't be here, Isabella whispered, but she didn't close the door. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Dominic kept his hands carefully at his sides, fighting the urge to reach for her. Can I come in, please? Isabella hesitated, war playing across her expressive features. Finally, she stepped back and opened the door wider. 5 minutes, that's all. The apartment was tiny, a studio with a kitchenette in one corner and a bathroom visible through a partially open door. But it was clean, organized with the same precision Isabella had brought to managing his office. A small bookshelf held medical texts about pregnancy and childbirth. Baby clothes were folded neatly in an open box beside the bed. She was preparing for their child alone. The realization threatened to break Dominic's carefully maintained composure. He turned to face Isabella, who stood near the door with her arms wrapped protectively around her stomach. When were you going to tell me? He asked quietly. I wasn't. The honesty in her voice was brutal. You made it very clear how you felt about children. I wasn't going to force you into something you didn't want. You should have given me the choice. Why? Isabella's eyes flashed with anger, the first real emotion beyond fear that she'd shown. So you could resent me? Resent the baby? So you could do your duty while hating every moment of it? Is that really what you think of me? I think you're a man who knows exactly what he wants. And you told Marco, told anyone who would listen, that children were liabilities you would never accept. Weaknesses waiting to be exploited. Her voice shook. I won't let my child grow up feeling like a burden. Dominic absorbed the words, the pain in them, the absolute conviction. This was the image Isabella had carried for 2 months, of a man who would view their child as nothing more than a strategic disadvantage. You're right, he said, and watched surprise flicker across her face. I did say those things. I believed them, even. For years, I told myself that family was a luxury I couldn't afford in this life, that caring about people made you vulnerable. Then why are you here? Because I was lying to myself. Dominic took a careful step closer. My father died protecting my mother. They held a gun to her head and made him kneel, and I watched him choose her life over his own. I was 15 years old, and I swore I would never give anyone that kind of power over me. I would never love someone so much that losing them could destroy me. Isabella's expression softened slightly, understanding beginning to dawn. Dominic, but then you walked into my office 8 months ago with your resume and your determination, and you looked at me like I was just a man instead of a monster, and every day after that you chipped away at the walls I'd built until I couldn't remember why I'd built them in the first place. He took another step. I fell in love with you, Isabella, completely, terrifyingly, and I was too afraid to admit it, even to myself. So you pushed me away instead? I kept you at a distance because I thought that would protect you. Thought if no one knew how much you meant to me, you'd be safe. Dominic's laugh was bitter. But all I did was make you believe I didn't care, that you didn't matter. Tears were sliding down Isabella's cheeks now, and Dominic wanted desperately to wipe them away. But he kept his hands at his sides, knowing he hadn't earned the right to touch her yet. The conversation you overheard, he continued. Every word of it was a lie I'd told myself so many times I believed it. Children were liabilities because I couldn't imagine loving someone that much. Family was weakness because I was too afraid to admit I wanted one. And then you disappeared, and Marco showed me the security footage, and I saw... His voice broke. Dominic swallowed hard, forcing himself to continue. I saw you were pregnant, and everything I thought I knew shattered, because suddenly all I could think about was you carrying our child alone. You going through doctor's appointments without anyone to hold your hand. You afraid and uncertain, with no one to tell you it would be okay. I managed. You shouldn't have had to. Dominic closed the remaining distance between them, stopping just close enough that he could feel her warmth. Isabella, I want this baby. I want you. I want the family I was too afraid to admit I needed. And I know I don't deserve a second chance after what I said, after how badly I failed you, but I'm asking anyway. Isabella looked up at him with those eyes that had haunted his dreams, searching his face for the truth. How do I know you won't change your mind? That you won't wake up one day and resent us for making you vulnerable? You don't. The admission was painful but necessary. I can't prove my feelings with words, Isabella. I can only show you through actions, through choices, through being the man you and our child deserve. That's not good enough. The rejection hit like a bullet, but Dominic forced himself to accept it. Then tell me what would be good enough. Tell me what I need to do, and I'll do it. Isabella was quiet for a long moment, her hand pressed against her stomach where their child grew. Finally, she moved to a small desk in the corner and pulled out an envelope. She handed it to Dominic with shaking fingers. What is this? Open it. Dominic tore open the envelope and pulled out legal documents. His eyes scanned the pages, confusion mounting with every line he read. These are custody papers, giving you full parental rights with no claims from the father. That's what I need, Isabella said, her voice steady despite the tears still streaming down her face. I need to know that if you change your mind, if you decide this is too much, you won't take my baby away from me. I need the protection of knowing that I'm the one who decides what happens. Isabella, I'm not trying to cut you out, she continued quickly. But I need the security of knowing that my child won't be a pawn in some custody battle. That if you wake up one day and remember all the reasons you thought children were liabilities, I can protect them from that rejection. Dominic looked at the papers in his hands, understanding flooding through him. This wasn't about keeping him away from the baby. This was about Isabella protecting herself and their child from the possibility of future pain. This was her asking him to prove, legally, bindingly, that he was choosing them freely, not out of obligation. Do you have a pen? He asked. Isabella blinked in surprise. What? A pen, to sign these. Dominic met her eyes steadily. You want assurance that I won't use my power against you or our child. That I'm choosing this freely, not because I feel trapped. So I'll sign whatever you need me to sign. You'd give up all legal rights to your own child? If that's what it takes for you to feel safe, yes. He found a pen on her desk and clicked it open. But Isabella, I need you to understand something. I'm signing these because I love you and I trust you. Not because I don't want to be a father. I'm going to be there for every doctor's appointment from now on, every ultrasound, every moment of this pregnancy and every day after our child is born. These papers don't change that. His signature was bold and decisive across the bottom of each page. When he finished, Dominic set the papers aside and took Isabella's hands in his, feeling the tremor that ran through her fingers. "I can't undo the past 2 months," he said quietly. "I can't take back the words you heard, or the pain I caused. But I can promise you this. I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving that I want you both. That you're not a liability or a weakness. That you're the most important thing in my world." Isabella's composure finally crumbled. She sagged forward, and Dominic caught her, pulling her carefully into his arms and feeling her pregnant belly press against him. Their child. Right there. Real and growing and already loved more than he'd thought possible. "I was so scared," Isabella sobbed against his chest. "So scared and alone, and I didn't know what to do." "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Dominic pressed his face into her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with something new, something maternal and precious. "You should never have had to be alone. That's my failure, my mistake." They stood like that for a long time, Isabella crying out 2 months of fear and loneliness, while Dominic held her and murmured apologies and promises into her hair. Finally, her tears slowed and she pulled back slightly to look up at him. "This doesn't fix everything," she said, her voice rough. "I'm still angry at you, still hurt. I know. And I need time to trust that this is real, that you won't change your mind when the reality of having a child hits you. Take all the time you need." Dominic cupped her face gently, his thumbs brushing away the remaining tears. "I'll be here, proving myself, showing you that I mean every word." Isabella searched his eyes, looking for cracks in his conviction. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. "Okay, but I'm not moving back to New York right away. I need space to figure this out. Then I'll get an apartment here. Be close, but not suffocating. Dominic, you can't just uproot your entire life. Watch me." His smile was wry. "I have excellent people managing things in New York. Marco can handle day-to-day operations while I'm here. And the things that absolutely require my presence, there are these inventions called airplanes. Fascinating devices." Despite everything, Isabella laughed, a small, watery sound that felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "You're impossible. I'm determined. There's a difference." Dominic sobered, his expression turning serious. "Isabella, I meant what I said. I love you. I love our child. And I will do whatever it takes to build a life with you both, even if that means proving myself from a distance while you decide whether to trust me again." Isabella was quiet for a moment, her hand returning to her stomach in that protective gesture Dominic was coming to recognize. Finally, she said, "I have a doctor's appointment next Tuesday. An ultrasound to check the baby's development." "What time?" 2 o'clock. "I'll be there." Dominic paused, then added carefully, "If you want me to be." "I want you to be," Isabella admitted softly. "Despite everything, despite how angry I am, I want our child to have a father, a real father who's present and involved." "Then that's what I'll be." Dominic pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, the gesture chaste and full of promise. "Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't waste it." He forced himself to step back, to put distance between them even though everything in him screamed to stay. But Isabella needed space, needed time to process everything that had just happened. Pushing too hard too fast would only drive her away again. "I should go," Dominic said reluctantly. "Let you rest, but I'll call tomorrow if that's all right. Check in, see how you're feeling." Isabella nodded, exhaustion evident in the lines of her face. "Okay." Dominic moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. "Isabella? One more thing." "Yes?" "I know this apartment is what you can afford on your own, and I respect your independence, but please, let me get you somewhere safer, somewhere with better security and a building that doesn't have a broken front door. Not because I'm trying to control you, but because the idea of you and our baby in this neighborhood terrifies me." He saw the refusal forming on her lips and added quickly, "You can pick the place. Anywhere in Chicago you want. I'll pay the rent, but the lease will be in your name. You'll have complete control. I just need to know you're safe." Isabella considered this, war playing across her features. Finally, she said, "I'll think about it. That's all I ask." Dominic opened the door, then looked back one more time. "Get some rest. I'll see you Tuesday." He walked down the 3 flights of stairs and out into the Chicago night, his heart feeling simultaneously lighter and heavier than it had in months. Lighter because he'd found Isabella, because she'd agreed to let him try to prove himself. Heavier because he'd seen the fear and hurt in her eyes, understood the depth of the damage his careless words had caused. But Dominic Castellano hadn't built an empire by giving up when things got difficult. He'd built it through persistence, through strategic planning, through seeing what needed to be done and doing it regardless of the obstacles. Winning back Isabella's trust would be the most important campaign of his life, and he intended to win. Marco was waiting when Dominic's plane touched down in New York at dawn. His second-in-command took one look at Dominic's face and said, "You found her." "I found her. And she's giving me a chance to prove myself." Dominic headed toward the waiting car, his mind already working through logistics. "I need you to clear my schedule for the next 3 months. Anything that absolutely requires my presence gets moved to video conferences or delayed. Everything else, you handle." Marco's eyebrows rose. "You're staying in Chicago?" "Not full-time, but I'll be there more than here." Dominic climbed into the back seat, Marco sliding in beside him. "She's 6 months pregnant, alone, and still deciding whether to trust me again. I need to show her I'm serious about being present for this. The families won't like you being absent so much." "The families can adjust." Dominic's tone made it clear this wasn't up for debate. "And Marco? I need you to find me an apartment in Chicago, somewhere nice but not ostentatious. Close to Isabella, but not so close I'm hovering." "Already looking into properties," Marco said with a slight smile. "Figured you'd want to stay near her." "You know me too well." "Someone has to." Marco pulled out his tablet, bringing up a list of potential apartments. "There's also the matter of security. If you're splitting time between cities, we need protocols in place to keep both locations secure." They spent the drive discussing logistics, setting up the infrastructure that would allow Dominic to maintain his business while being present for Isabella and their child. By the time they reached Dominic's Manhattan penthouse, the framework was in place. But as Dominic stood in his bedroom, the room where he'd held Isabella countless times, where they'd shared whispered conversations in the dark, the enormity of what he was trying to accomplish hit him. He was asking her to trust him again after he'd shattered that trust, asking her to believe his promises when his past actions had proven him capable of devastating carelessness. It wasn't enough to just show up. He needed to show her through actions, through choices, through becoming the man she and their child deserved. Starting with the doctor's appointment on Tuesday. Dominic pulled out his phone and called his private doctor in New York. "I need recommendations for the best OB/GYN in Chicago, someone who specializes in high-risk pregnancies." "Is everything all right?" "I'm going to be a father," Dominic said, the words still feeling foreign and wonderful on his tongue. "And I want to make sure the mother of my child has access to the best possible care." The call lasted 20 minutes, ending with a list of 3 highly recommended specialists in Chicago. Dominic sent the information to Isabella with a simple text. "These doctors came highly recommended if you want a second opinion. No pressure, just options." Her response came an hour later. "Thank you. I'll look into them." It was a start. Small, tentative, but a start nonetheless. Tuesday arrived with agonizing slowness. Dominic flew back to Chicago Monday night, checking into a suite at the Four Seasons rather than the apartment Marco had found. He wanted to give Isabella space, not crowd her with his proximity. He spent Tuesday morning in back-to-back video conferences, handling business matters with half his attention, while the other half counted down the minutes until 2 o'clock. At 1:30, Dominic pulled up outside Isabella's apartment building. She emerged 10 minutes later dressed in maternity clothes that couldn't quite hide how much weight she'd lost in her face and limbs despite her growing belly. She stopped short when she saw him leaning against the car, surprise flickering across her features. "You came." "I said I would." Dominic opened the passenger door. "I've learned not to make promises I can't keep." Isabella hesitated, then slid into the car. "The clinic is on the north side, about 20 minutes from here." They drove in silence, tension humming between them. Dominic wanted to fill the quiet with reassurances, with promises and explanations, but he forced himself to wait, to let Isabella set the pace. Finally, she spoke. I looked at those doctor recommendations you sent. Called the first one on the list. And? She's taking new patients. I have an appointment with her next week for a full workup. Isabella glanced at him. The practice is in a better neighborhood than my current clinic. Much better. Good. Dominic kept his eyes on the road. You deserve the best care available. It's expensive. I don't care what it costs. Isabella was quiet for a moment, then said softly, Thank you. For the referrals, for being here. You don't need to thank me for doing what I should have been doing all along. Dominic reached across the console and took her hand carefully. This is where I want to be, Isabella. Right here, beside you. Her fingers tightened around his, and Dominic felt something in his chest ease slightly. They had a long way to go, mountains of hurt to work through, but in this moment, Isabella was letting him hold her hand. It was enough. The clinic was busy, the waiting room filled with other expectant mothers in various stages of pregnancy. Dominic stayed close to Isabella as she checked in, his hand a steady pressure at the small of her back. Other women glanced at them curiously, no doubt wondering about the man in the expensive suit accompanying the nervous-looking pregnant woman. Isabella Romano? A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. They followed her back to an examination room where Isabella was instructed to change into a gown. Dominic waited outside, giving her privacy, then knocked softly before entering when she called for him. She looked impossibly vulnerable, sitting on the examination table in the thin gown, her hand pressed protectively over her belly. Dominic moved to stand beside her, careful not to crowd, waiting for permission. You can sit, Isabella said, gesturing to the chair beside the exam table. The doctor arrived minutes later, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an efficient manner. Ms. Romano, good to see you again. And this must be the baby's father? Yes, Dominic and Isabella said simultaneously. The doctor smiled. Wonderful to have you both here. Let's take a look at how your little one is developing, shall we? The ultrasound machine was wheeled over, and Dominic watched as the doctor squeezed gel onto Isabella's exposed stomach. The wand pressed against her skin, moving in slow circles while grainy images appeared on the screen beside them. Then, suddenly, there it was. A tiny form curled in the darkness, features visible in profile. Arms and legs, fingers and toes. A heartbeat pulsing steady and strong. Their child. Dominic felt his breath catch, emotion slamming into him with the force of a freight train. That was his son or daughter. That tiny, perfect being existed because of a night when he and Isabella had come together, when they'd created something beautiful out of their secret love. Everything looks good, the doctor was saying, her voice seeming to come from very far away. Baby's measuring right on track for 24 weeks. Heartbeat is strong and steady. Would you like to know the sex? Dominic looked at Isabella, leaving the choice to her. She met his eyes, and in that moment, something passed between them. A shared wonder, a recognition that whatever had come before, whatever pain they still needed to work through, this child was theirs. Yes, Isabella whispered. We'd like to know. The doctor smiled and pointed to the screen. Congratulations. You're having a girl. A daughter. Dominic was going to have a daughter. He looked back at the screen, at the tiny form of his child, and felt tears sting his eyes for the first time since his mother's funeral. A little girl who would have Isabella's strength and courage, who he would protect with every breath in his body. She's perfect, he managed, his voice rough. She is, Isabella agreed, and when Dominic looked at her, he saw tears streaming down her face too. The rest of the appointment passed in a blur of information, due dates and vitamin recommendations and signs to watch for. Dominic absorbed all of it, filing away every detail. When they finally left the clinic, he was carrying printouts of ultrasound images and a head full of plans. Are you hungry? He asked as they reached the car. We could get dinner, talk. Isabella hesitated, then nodded. There's a small Italian place near my apartment. Nothing fancy, but the food's good. Lead the way. The restaurant was indeed small, tucked into a corner with red checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. They ordered pasta and ate in comfortable silence for a while, the tension from earlier dissipated by the shared experience of seeing their daughter for the first time. Finally, Isabella set down her fork and looked at Dominic across the table. I've been thinking about what you said. about getting a safer apartment. And I'd like to take you up on that offer. She took a breath. Not because I'm giving in or letting you control things, but because you're right. This neighborhood isn't safe for a woman alone with a baby, and I need to start thinking about what's best for her, not just my pride. Relief flooded through Dominic. We can start looking this week, wherever you want. I'd like something near the new doctor's office, a building with security and an elevator. Isabella twisted her napkin between her fingers. And Dominic, I want you to understand something. This doesn't mean we're back together. It doesn't mean I've forgiven everything or that I'm ready to jump back into a relationship. I understand. I'm doing this for our daughter because she deserves a safe home and a father who's present. But you and I, we need time. We need to rebuild trust before we can be anything more than co-parents. Then that's what we'll do, Dominic said quietly. However long it takes, Isabella, I'll prove myself worthy of your trust again. She studied him for a long moment, searching his face for signs of deception or impatience. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her because she nodded slowly. Okay, Isabella said, let's try this. Co-parents working toward something more. But Dominic, if you hurt me again, if you make me regret giving you this chance, I'm gone. And this time you won't find me. The threat was clear, delivered with quiet conviction, and Dominic believed every word. I won't hurt you again, he promised. You have my word. It was a start, fragile, tentative, but real. And as they finished dinner and Dominic drove Isabella back to her apartment, he felt hope beginning to bloom in his chest. He'd found her. She was giving him a chance, and in 3.5 months, he would hold his daughter for the first time. The future was still uncertain, still scarred by past mistakes. But for the first time in months, Dominic believed they might actually make it through. The next 3 weeks unfolded with careful deliberation, each day a delicate dance between Dominic's determination to prove himself and Isabella's cautious willingness to let him try. He kept his word about finding her a better apartment, spending an entire Saturday driving her through neighborhoods on Chicago's North Side until she fell in love with a 2-bedroom unit in a pre-war building with actual security guards and an elevator that didn't shake ominously between floors. It's too much, Isabella had protested when she saw the spacious living room with windows overlooking a tree-lined street. Dominic, I don't need something this nice. Our daughter does. He'd moved to stand beside her at the window, careful to maintain the physical distance Isabella still needed. She deserves a safe neighborhood and a room of her own. Besides, there's space for a nursery here. The 2nd bedroom gets morning light, perfect for a baby. Isabella had pressed her hand against the window glass, her reflection showing the internal struggle playing across her face. You're making this very hard to say no to. That's the idea. Dominic had allowed himself a small smile. But if you really hate it, we'll keep looking. This is your choice, Isabella. I'm just providing options. She'd signed the lease that afternoon. Dominic handled the financial arrangements while Isabella maintained legal control, exactly as he'd promised. The moving process was swift. Isabella had accumulated very little during her months in hiding, and Dominic hired professional movers who had her settled within 2 days. He bought furniture for the nursery without asking permission, a decision that sparked their first real argument in the new apartment. You can't just make decisions like this without consulting me, Isabella said, standing in the doorway of the 2nd bedroom while delivery men assembled a white crib that probably cost more than her first car. This is exactly the kind of controlling behavior I was afraid of. Dominic had been reviewing contracts on his laptop in the living room. He closed it carefully and stood, moving to where Isabella watched the assembly with crossed arms and fire in her eyes. You're right. I should have asked first. I apologize. The quick capitulation seemed to surprise her. That's it? No argument about how you were just trying to help? I was trying to help, but that doesn't excuse making unilateral decisions about our daughter's nursery. Dominic gestured toward the furniture. If you hate it, I'll have it returned and we'll pick something out together. Your choice. Isabella studied the crib, the matching changing table, the rocking chair positioned near the window. Her expression softened slightly. It's beautiful. That's not the point. I know. The point is respect and partnership. Dominic moved closer, but stopped when he saw her tense. I'm still learning how to do this, Isabella. How to be present without being overwhelming. How to help without controlling. I'm going to make mistakes. I need you to ask me first about everything involving the baby. We make decisions together, or not at all. Agreed. He meant it. The empire Dominic had built required absolute control, unquestioned authority. But this, Isabella, their daughter, the family he was desperately trying to build, this required something different, required him to share power instead of wielding it. The adjustment was harder than he'd anticipated, but every time Dominic felt the urge to simply handle something himself, to make the efficient decision and present it as fait accompli, he forced himself to stop, to call Isabella, to ask rather than tell. What color should we paint the nursery? Did she prefer the pediatrician on the north side or the one downtown? Should they register for baby supplies now or wait until after the shower? Isabella's mother was insisting on throwing. Each question was a small surrender of control. Each conversation was Dominic proving he could be a partner instead of a commander. Isabella noticed. He could see the gradual softening in her eyes, the way her shoulders relaxed incrementally when he arrived for their now regular dinner dates. They weren't romantic. Isabella had been clear about maintaining boundaries, but they were comfortable. Easy in ways their stolen moments in New York had never been. "Tell me about your day," Dominic would say, and Isabella would talk about the prenatal yoga class she'd started attending, or the book she was reading about infant development, or the way the baby had kicked during a particularly loud thunderstorm. In return, Dominic told her about the business he was slowly restructuring to allow more remote work, about Marco's bewilderment at seeing his ruthless boss take paternity leave preparation seriously, about the conversation with Vincent Moretti, where the old man had laughed and said, "Welcome to the club of men who thought they were too smart for love." They were building something new, something fragile but real. Then came the night everything changed. Dominic was in his Chicago apartment. He'd finally rented one rather than living in hotels, when his phone rang at 11 p.m. Isabella's name on the screen sent his heart racing immediately. She never called this late. "What's wrong?" he answered, already grabbing his keys. "I don't know if anything's wrong." Isabella's voice was tight with controlled panic. "But I'm bleeding. Not a lot, but enough that I'm scared. And the doctor's office won't open until morning. And I know I'm probably overreacting, but I'm coming. Right now. Don't move." Dominic was already in the hallway, taking the stairs because waiting for the elevator was impossible. "Have you called an ambulance?" "No, I didn't want to." "Call 911. I'll meet you at the hospital." He burst out onto the street, flagging down a taxi with the kind of authority that made the driver stop immediately. "Isabella, hang up and call for help. Promise me." "Okay. Okay. I will." The line went dead. Dominic gave the driver Isabella's address and a $100 bill, promising another $100 if they got there in under 5 minutes. The taxi wove through late-night traffic with reckless speed while Dominic's mind raced through terrible possibilities. Bleeding during pregnancy could mean anything from minor complications to catastrophic loss. He couldn't lose their daughter, couldn't lose the future he'd just started to believe was possible. The ambulance was already outside Isabella's building when Dominic arrived. He took the stairs 3 at a time, bursting into her apartment to find paramedics checking her vital signs while she sat on the couch looking small and terrified. "Dominic." Isabella reached for him, and he was at her side instantly, taking her hand and pressing it against his chest. "I'm here. I've got you." He looked at the paramedics. "What's happening?" "Vitals are stable," the older of the two said. "Some spotting, which can be normal at this stage but should be checked out. We're taking her to Northwestern Memorial to be safe." "I'm riding with her." No one argued. Within minutes, they were in the ambulance, Isabella on the gurney, while Dominic sat beside her holding her hand like it was the only thing anchoring him to earth. Her fingers were ice cold despite the warm night, trembling against his palm. "She was moving earlier," Isabella whispered. "I felt her kicking during dinner, but now she's so quiet, and I keep thinking, don't." Dominic pressed his lips to her knuckles. "Don't go there. We're going to the hospital. They're going to check everything, and our daughter is going to be fine." "You don't know that. I know that you're strong, and she's strong, and we're going to get through this together." He met her eyes, willing her to believe him. "You're not alone anymore, Isabella. Whatever happens, you're not facing it alone." The emergency room at Northwestern Memorial was controlled chaos. Nurses moving with efficient urgency, doctors consulting in low voices. the constant beep of monitors creating an anxious symphony. Isabella was taken immediately to an examination room while Dominic was directed to wait outside. He paced the hallway like a caged animal, his mind supplying increasingly horrific scenarios. This was his fault. The stress of their separation, of Isabella living in that terrible apartment for months, of her working herself to exhaustion to maintain independence, all of it had taken a toll. And now their daughter might pay the price for Dominic's mistakes. "Mr. Castellano?" A doctor emerged from Isabella's room, her expression professionally neutral. "You can come in now." Dominic was through the door before she finished speaking. Isabella lay on the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors, her face pale, but no longer panicked. And on the screen beside her, a steady heartbeat pulsed with reassuring rhythm. "The baby?" Dominic managed. "Is fine," the doctor said with a gentle smile. "Heartbeat is strong and steady. The bleeding was caused by a minor placental irritation. Nothing serious, but it needs monitoring. I'm recommending reduced activity for the next week and a follow-up appointment with your OB." Relief hit Dominic so hard he had to grip the bed rail to stay upright. "She's okay. They're both okay." "We're both okay," Isabella confirmed, tears streaming down her face. "Dominic," she started kicking again right after they did the ultrasound, like she was saying, "I'm still here, Mama." He moved to her side, careful of the IV line and monitors, and gathered her into his arms as much as the equipment allowed. Isabella buried her face in his shoulder and sobbed, great heaving cries of relief and residual fear that soaked through his shirt. "I've got you," Dominic murmured into her hair. "I've got you both. You're safe." They stayed like that until Isabella's tears subsided and the doctor returned with discharge instructions. Bed rest for 3 days, minimal activity for a week after that, and immediate return to the hospital if any bleeding resumed. The doctor also recommended having someone stay with Isabella to monitor her condition. "I'll stay," Dominic said before Isabella could protest. "I'll sleep on the couch. You won't even know I'm there." Isabella looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion and lingering fear won out. "Okay, just for tonight." But one night became 2, then 3, then a week. Dominic took over cooking duties, producing surprisingly competent meals from Isabella's small kitchen. He worked from his laptop at her dining table, taking calls in the hallway when they required privacy, and maintained the careful physical distance Isabella still needed while being constantly available if she needed anything. On the 4th morning, Isabella emerged from her bedroom to find Dominic already in the kitchen making breakfast. He'd started keeping groceries at her apartment, healthy foods the pregnancy books recommended. This morning it was scrambled eggs with vegetables and whole grain toast. "You don't have to keep doing this," Isabella said, settling onto the couch with a hand pressed to her lower back. "I'm feeling better. You can go back to your apartment." Dominic plated the eggs and brought them to her, along with the prenatal vitamins she was supposed to take with meals. "Do you want me to leave?" "That's not what I said." "Then I'm staying." He sat in the armchair across from her, maintaining that careful distance. "Isabella, when I got your call that night, when I thought something might be wrong with you or the baby, I realized something. I don't want to be the father who shows up for scheduled visits and important appointments. I want to be present for the mundane moments too, for breakfast and bedtime and everything in between." Isabella set down her fork, studying him with an intensity that made Dominic feel transparent. "You're asking to move in." "I'm asking for a chance to be the partner you deserve. Not just the father of your child, but the man who's there when you can't sleep because the baby's kicking your ribs. The one who makes you tea when your back hurts and assembles ridiculous amounts of baby furniture and learns how to install car seats properly." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm asking for more than co-parenting, Isabella. I'm asking for a real chance at building a life together. We tried that once. It didn't work out. We tried it in secret, in stolen moments, with me too afraid to admit what you meant to me." Dominic's voice was steady, despite the fear churning in his gut. "Let me try again. The right way this time. Open and honest, with no more walls between us." Isabella looked away, her hand moving unconsciously to her stomach where their daughter grew stronger every day. "I'm still angry at you, still hurt. I know. And I don't know if I can trust that you won't revert to the man who saw children as liabilities the moment things get difficult." "Then let me prove it." Dominic waited until she met his eyes again. "Give me 6 weeks. until the baby comes. Let me show you through actions instead of words that I've changed, that I want this family more than anything else in my life. And if I still don't trust you after 6 weeks? The question hurt, but Dominic forced himself to answer honestly. Then I'll move out. I'll be the best co-parent I can possibly be, but I'll respect your boundaries. I won't push for more than you're willing to give. Isabella was silent for a long time, her breakfast growing cold on the plate. Finally, she said, "You sleep on the couch. We maintain separate spaces. And if I say I need time alone, you give it to me without argument." Hope bloomed in Dominic's chest. Agreed. This isn't me saying we're back together. This is a trial run. Me seeing if the man you're showing me now is real or just a performance that will fade once the novelty wears off. I understand. Isabella took a shaky breath. Okay, 6 weeks. But Dominic, if you hurt me again, if you make me regret this, I'll make sure you regret it more. I have signed documents giving me full custody. I'll use them. The threat would have terrified him once. Now it just made Dominic love her more for the fierce protectiveness she showed their daughter. You won't need to, I promise. Over the next weeks, they settled into a rhythm that felt almost domestic. Dominic moved his essential belongings into Isabella's second bedroom, now converted to nursery and makeshift office, and structured his days around her needs. Morning coffee ready when she woke up. Lunch prepared with the precise nutritional balance her pregnancy required. Evenings spent assembling baby equipment while Isabella read aloud from parenting books that made them both laugh and panic in equal measure. Listen to this, Isabella said one night, reading from a book about infant development. Your baby will wake every 2 to 3 hours for feeding, resulting in severe sleep deprivation for both parents. Every 2 to 3 hours, for months. Dominic looked up from the complicated instruction manual for a bottle sterilizer. We'll take shifts. You feed, I'll handle diaper changes and getting her back to sleep. You have a business empire to run. You can't function on no sleep. I'll function on whatever sleep I get. Isabella, I'm not helping you with this baby. I'm raising her with you. Equal partners, equal responsibility. He abandoned the sterilizer, which he was beginning to suspect was designed by sadists, and moved to sit beside her on the couch. Besides, Marco's been running things in New York with minimal input from me for weeks now. Either he's proven he can handle more autonomy, or I've been deluding myself about how essential I am to daily operations. The great Dominic Castellano admitting he might not be indispensable? The world must be ending. My world already ended. Then it started again the day I realized you were pregnant. Dominic carefully took her hand, the gesture still tentative despite weeks of cohabitation. Everything I built before was just preparation for this. For you. For our daughter. Isabella's fingers tightened around his. They sat like that in comfortable silence, the Chicago skyline glittering through the windows while their daughter kicked against Isabella's ribs with increasing vigor. She's so active tonight, Isabella murmured. Here, feel. She guided Dominic's hand to her stomach, pressing his palm against the spot where their daughter was staging what felt like an acrobatic performance. The movement beneath his fingers was strong and insistent, tiny feet or fists pushing against the boundaries of Isabella's womb. She's a fighter, Dominic said, awe coloring his voice, just like her mother. Let's hope she has your strategic mind and my common sense. Otherwise, we're in trouble. Let's hope she has your compassion and my protective instincts. Then she'll be unstoppable. Isabella laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. Over the past weeks, Dominic had been cataloging every small victory, each moment when Isabella's walls lowered incrementally, when she let him see the woman who'd fallen in love with him in stolen moments behind closed doors. This laughter felt like a breakthrough. I've been thinking about names, Isabella said suddenly. If you want to discuss it. I absolutely want to discuss it. Dominic would have discussed paint drying if it meant these moments of peaceful domesticity continued. What were you considering? I like Sophia. It means wisdom. Isabella's hand covered his where it still rested on her stomach. And maybe Rose for a middle name, after your mother. The suggestion hit Dominic like a physical blow. His mother, dead for 27 years, killed by the violence that defined their world, had never gotten to meet her grandchildren. Had died believing her son would follow his father into an early grave, consumed by the same empire that had destroyed them both. You remembered her name, Dominic said, his voice rough with emotion. You told me about her once, late at night after you'd had too much whiskey and your guard was down. Isabella turned to face him fully, her expression soft. You said she used to garden, that she kept roses despite your father saying they were frivolous, that she'd smell like flowers and earth when she kissed you goodnight. Dominic had forgotten telling Isabella that story, had forgotten the vulnerability of those whiskey-soaked confessions. But she'd remembered, had carried the memory of his mother through all the pain and separation, and now she was offering to honor that memory by giving their daughter Rose as a middle name. Sophia Rose Castellano. Dominic tested the name, feeling it settle over his heart like a benediction. It's perfect. We could hyphenate, Isabella suggested tentatively. Sophia Rose Romano Castellano. Give her both our names. I'd like that. Dominic pressed his forehead to Isabella's, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the underlying sweetness that was uniquely hers. Thank you. For remembering. For honoring her. She was your mother. She made you who you are. Our daughter should carry that legacy. They stayed close for a moment longer, the space between them charged with something that felt like hope. Then Isabella pulled back slightly, her expression turning serious. Dominic, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Anything. What happens when we go back to New York? When real life starts again and you're pulled back into the business? Isabella's eyes searched his face. Right now you're playing house with me in Chicago, but your empire is in Manhattan. Your responsibilities are there. How does this, she gestured between them, work when geography and business demands pull us apart? It was the question Dominic had been anticipating and dreading in equal measure. The answer required vulnerability he still wasn't comfortable with, required admitting truths he'd spent decades denying. I'm restructuring the business, he said carefully. Marco's been training to take over day-to-day operations for months now, even before I found you. I was already tired, Isabella. Tired of the violence and the constant vigilance and the weight of maintaining an empire built on fear. You're planning to step back? I'm planning to transition into a different role, advisory rather than operational. I'll still be involved, still maintain control over major decisions, but the daily grind, the meetings and negotiations and territorial disputes, Marco can handle that. Dominic took both her hands in his. I want to be present for our daughter's life, for your life. That means putting family first instead of business. Isabella looked skeptical. Men like you don't just walk away from power. I'm not walking away. I'm reprioritizing. He squeezed her hands gently. My father died because he couldn't separate his business from his family. Couldn't see that protecting one sometimes meant compromising the other. I won't make that mistake. Sophia deserves a father who's alive and present, not one who's so consumed by empire building that he misses her childhood. And you think Marco is ready for that kind of responsibility? I think Marco has been ready for years. I was just too controlling to admit it. Dominic's smile was self-deprecating. Turns out learning to delegate starts with trusting your second-in-command to handle things without your constant oversight. Isabella studied him for a long moment, clearly weighing his words against his past actions. When were you planning to tell me about this restructuring? Tonight, actually. I wanted to have concrete plans in place first, not just vague intentions. Dominic released one of her hands to pull a folder from his laptop bag. These are the transition documents. Marco takes over as CEO effective 2 months from now. I become chairman of the board, still involved in major decisions but not responsible for daily operations. Isabella took the folder, paging through the legal documents with widening eyes. This is really happening. You're actually stepping back. For you, for Sophia, for the life I want us to build together. Dominic watched her read, his heart hammering against his ribs. I know it doesn't erase the past, doesn't make up for the months you spent alone and afraid, but I'm trying to show you through actions that I meant what I said. You and our daughter are the most important things in my world. Isabella closed the folder carefully, her hands trembling slightly. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come back to New York with me when Sophia's born. That we'll raise her together, in the same city, in the same home. Dominic knew he was pushing, knew Isabella had asked for time, and he was demanding decisions. But the 6 weeks she'd given him were ticking down, and he needed to know if there was a future beyond this temporary arrangement. Say you'll give us a real chance, Isabella, not as co-parents maintaining separate lives, but as partners building a family together. You're asking me to trust you completely, to uproot my life again and move back to the city where everything fell apart. I'm asking you to trust that I've learned from my mistakes, that the man standing in front of you now understands what's important. Dominic cupped her face gently, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. I love you, Isabella Romano. I've loved you since you walked into my office with fire in your eyes and refused to be intimidated. And I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving that love is real. Tears spilled down Isabella's cheeks, but her eyes were searching his face with desperate hope rather than fear. I want to believe you. I want to so badly it scares me. Then take the leap. Trust me one more time. Dominic's voice dropped to a whisper. I won't let you fall, I promise. Isabella was quiet for so long Dominic thought she might refuse. His heart was breaking in slow motion, preparing for the rejection he'd earned through months of careless cruelty. Then she spoke, her voice steady despite the tears. Okay. When Sophia is born, we'll go back to New York together. We'll try to build a real life, a real family. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling it pound beneath her palm. But Dominic, this is your last chance. If you break my heart again, if you make me regret trusting you, I'm gone for good. Signed documents or not, I'll find a way to disappear that even your resources can't track. You won't need to, I swear it. Dominic pressed his lips to her forehead, breathing her in. Thank you for giving me this chance, for being brave enough to trust again. They held each other as the city lights flickered outside and their daughter moved between them, a reminder of everything they had to lose and everything they might gain. The road ahead was still uncertain, still fraught with the potential for heartbreak. But for the first time since Isabella had disappeared from his life, Dominic believed they might actually make it. The next morning, Isabella woke to find Dominic in the kitchen making pancakes shaped like hearts. It was ridiculously sentimental, completely unlike the ruthless businessman she'd first met, and absolutely perfect. You're trying to bribe me with breakfast food, she accused, settling onto a bar stool with her hand pressed to her aching back. Is it working? Dominic slid a plate in front of her, the pancakes perfectly golden and accompanied by fresh fruit. Unfortunately, yes. Isabella cut into a pancake, the fluffy texture melting on her tongue. Where did you learn to cook like this? YouTube, mostly, and several panicked phone calls to Marco's wife, who thinks it's hilarious that I'm domesticating. Dominic poured her orange juice with the same precision he'd once applied to hostile takeovers. I'm a fast learner when properly motivated. And I'm proper motivation? You and Sophia are the only motivation I need. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence, the morning sun streaming through the windows and painting everything in shades of gold. This was what Isabella had dreamed of during those long months alone. Simple domestic moments, shared meals, the quiet intimacy of building a life together. She was still terrified it might all fall apart, still waiting for Dominic to revert to the cold, calculating man who'd declared children liabilities. But every day he showed up, every small gesture of care and consideration chipped away at her fear. Maybe, just maybe, they could actually make this work. I have a meeting this afternoon, Dominic said, interrupting her thoughts. Video conference with Marco about the transition timeline. Do you need anything before I'm tied up for a few hours? I'm fine. Actually, I was thinking about going for a walk. The doctor said light exercise is good as long as I don't overdo it. Dominic's expression immediately shifted to concern. I'll come with you. Dominic, you have a meeting. Marco can wait. Your safety is more important. Isabella felt warmth bloom in her chest at the casual way he prioritized her over business. The old Dominic would have sent her with a bodyguard and thought nothing more of it. This version canceled meetings and rearranged his schedule without hesitation. Okay, she said softly. A walk sounds nice. They strolled through the neighborhood hand in hand, Dominic matching his pace to Isabella's slower gait. She pointed out her favorite shops, the coffee place with the best decaf lattes, the bookstore where she'd spent hours browsing parenting guides. Dominic listened and asked questions and committed every detail to memory, like her preferences were strategic intelligence worth safeguarding. Thank you, Isabella said as they made their way back to the apartment. For being here. For trying so hard. Dominic stopped on the sidewalk, turning to face her fully. I'm not trying, Isabella. This is who I am now. Who I want to be. For you. For Sophia. For the family we're building. And standing there in the afternoon sunshine with her hand in his and their daughter moving beneath her heart, Isabella finally let herself believe him. The weeks that followed carried a fragile peace that Isabella guarded carefully, still half expecting it to shatter. But Dominic remained constant, present during the 3 a.m. leg cramps that woke her crying, patient when pregnancy hormones made her snap at him over insignificant details, and unfailingly gentle when fear crept in during the quiet hours. At 36 weeks, Isabella's body began preparing for labor with increasing urgency. Braxton Hicks' contractions came and went with uncomfortable regularity, each one sending Dominic into barely contained panic, until Isabella assured him it was normal. Her ankles swelled despite keeping them elevated. Sleep became nearly impossible, with Sophia performing acrobatics against her ribs. Through it all, Dominic adapted. He researched pregnancy complications with the same intensity he'd once applied to hostile takeovers, memorized warning signs that required immediate medical attention, and kept the hospital bag packed and ready by the door with military precision. "You're hovering again," Isabella said one afternoon, catching him watching her from across the room with that expression of controlled worry he couldn't quite hide. "I'm observing," Dominic corrected, not bothering to deny it. "There's a difference. You've been observing me sleep for the past hour. That's hovering. You make small distressed sounds when you sleep now. I'm making sure you're comfortable." Isabella's irritation melted despite herself. "I'm fine. The baby's fine. You need to relax before you give yourself an ulcer." "I'll relax when Sophia's here and you're both healthy." Dominic moved to sit beside her on the couch, his hand finding her swollen belly with the familiarity of practice. "Is that so unreasonable?" "It's sweet, also slightly neurotic." Isabella covered his hand with hers, feeling Sophia kick against their joined palms. "But I appreciate the concern, even when it drives me crazy. I can't help it. Every time I think about you going through labor, about all the things that could go wrong." He stopped, jaw tightening. "I've faced down armed men without flinching. But the thought of you in pain, of something happening to either of you, terrifies me in ways I didn't know were possible." The raw admission settled between them. Isabella had been watching Dominic carefully over these weeks, cataloging the small ways he'd changed. But this vulnerability, this admission of fear from a man who'd built an empire on appearing invincible, this felt significant. "I'm scared too," Isabella said quietly. "Terrified, actually. But we're doing this together. That has to count for something." "It counts for everything." Dominic pressed his lips to her temple, the gesture tender. "I love you, Isabella. I know I've said it before, but I need you to understand. I have never loved anything or anyone the way I love you and Sophia. You're my entire world." Isabella turned to face him fully, studying the sincerity in his dark eyes. Over the past weeks, she'd felt her resistance crumbling incrementally. The walls she'd built to protect her heart were wearing thin under the constant assault of Dominic's devotion. She was falling in love with him all over again, or perhaps admitting she'd never truly stopped. "I love you too," she whispered, the words both terrifying and liberating. "I've been fighting it, trying to protect myself, but I can't anymore. I love you, Dominic, completely, terrifyingly." The kiss was inevitable, a slow meeting of lips that carried months of longing and fear and hope. Dominic cupped her face like she was something precious and fragile, kissing her with a reverence that made tears sting behind Isabella's closed eyes. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I've missed this," Dominic murmured against her lips. "Missed you." "I've missed you too. Even when I was furious at you, even when I was convinced I should hate you, I missed this." Isabella rested her forehead against his. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise that when things get hard, and they will get hard, with a newborn and sleep deprivation and all the challenges we can't predict, you won't shut me out, that you'll talk to me instead of making decisions alone. I promise." Dominic's voice was fierce with conviction. "No more secrets, no more walls. We face everything together." They sealed the promise with another kiss, this one deeper, more certain. And for the first time since hearing those devastating words outside Dominic's office, Isabella allowed herself to believe in the future they were building. The belief was tested 2 days later when Isabella woke at 4 a.m. with contractions that felt different from the practice ones she'd been experiencing. These were lower, sharper, coming with concerning regularity. She lay still for several minutes, timing them with the app on her phone, before gently shaking Dominic awake. "I think this is it," she said, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "Real labor. The contractions are 7 minutes apart." Dominic was instantly alert, the grogginess vanishing from his eyes as he shifted into crisis mode. "How long have you been timing them?" "About 40 minutes. "Why didn't you wake me sooner?" He was already moving, pulling on clothes with efficient speed. "Because I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to alarm you if it was false labor." Another contraction gripped her abdomen, stronger than before, and Isabella breathed through it with the techniques they'd learned in birthing class. "But these feel real, very real." Dominic had the hospital bag in hand before the contraction ended. "Can you walk?" "I'm pregnant, not paralyzed." Isabella let him help her stand anyway, grateful for his steadying presence as another contraction hit. "We should call the doctor." "Already texting her." Dominic kept one arm around Isabella while typing on his phone with the other, multitasking with the focus she remembered from watching him manage business crises. "She says to head to the hospital when contractions are 5 minutes apart or if your water breaks. We're close enough that we should go now." The drive to Northwestern Memorial was surreal. Chicago's streets nearly empty at this hour, streetlights casting orange pools across the pavement while Isabella breathed through contractions that were intensifying with alarming speed. Dominic drove with careful control, one hand on the wheel and the other clasping Isabella's, his thumb rubbing soothing circles against her palm. "You're doing great," he murmured during a particularly intense contraction. "Just keep breathing. We're almost there." "This hurts so much more than the book said it would," Isabella gasped when the contraction finally released its grip. "We can get you the epidural as soon as we arrive, whatever you need for the pain." "I wanted to try without it first, see how far I could get." "Isabella, you don't have to prove anything. If you're in pain, there's no shame in asking for relief." She loved him for saying it without judgment, for not pushing his own agenda about how labor should proceed. "Let's just see how it goes. I'll decide when we get there." The hospital staff was expecting them. Dominic had called ahead while Isabella was getting dressed, ensuring everything would be ready for their arrival. They were taken immediately to a labor and delivery room where a nurse checked Isabella's progression with practiced efficiency. "You're at 5 centimeters already," the nurse announced with an encouraging smile. "Moving right along. First baby?" "Yes," Isabella managed between contractions. "You're doing wonderfully. Let's get you comfortable, and we'll monitor the baby's heartbeat while you decide about pain management." The next hours blurred into a haze of intensifying contractions, Dominic's steady presence beside the bed, and the constant monitoring of Sophia's heartbeat through the fetal monitor. Isabella tried to manage the pain through breathing techniques and position changes, but by 8 centimeters she was ready to admit defeat. "I want the epidural," she told Dominic through gritted teeth. "Right now, please." "I'll get the nurse." He was gone and back within seconds, and the anesthesiologist arrived shortly after to administer the blessed relief of pain medication. Isabella felt guilty for caving. Some irrational part of her brain insisted she should have been stronger, but Dominic would hear none of it. "You've been in labor for 6 hours and you're about to push a whole human being out of your body," he said firmly, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "You're the strongest person I've ever met. Taking medication doesn't change that." "I love you," Isabella whispered, the words made easier by exhaustion and the fading pain. "I love you too, so much." Dominic kissed her forehead. "You're almost there. Soon we'll meet our daughter." The epidural brought enough relief that Isabella could focus on something besides the pain. She watched Dominic move around the room with contained energy, adjusting her pillows, bringing ice chips when she asked, speaking in low tones with the medical staff. This was a side of him few people ever saw, the caretaker beneath the commander, the gentle man hidden behind the ruthless businessman. "Mr. Castellano," the nurse said at one point, "you might want to eat something. Labor can take a while from here, and you'll need your strength for the pushing phase." "I'm not leaving." Dominic's tone made it clear this wasn't negotiable. "There's a cafeteria on the second floor." "I said I'm not leaving." He softened his voice slightly. Thank you for the concern, but I'm staying right here until my daughter is born. The nurse wisely didn't push further. Isabella reached for Dominic's hand, squeezing it gratefully. You should eat something, though. I need you functional, not passed out on the floor. I'll eat after Sophia arrives. Dominic, Isabella, I have faced down hostile takeovers and territorial disputes without food or sleep. I can handle a few more hours. His expression was resolute. I'm not leaving your side, not for anything. She didn't have the energy to argue, and truthfully, she didn't want him to leave. Having Dominic there, solid and steady and completely focused on her, made the terrifying process of labor slightly less overwhelming. At 10 centimeters, the doctor arrived with the news Isabella had been simultaneously dreading and anticipating. You're fully dilated. It's time to start pushing. Terror spiked through Isabella's exhaustion. This was it. After months of preparation and planning and fear, she was about to meet her daughter, their daughter. The tiny life they'd created was about to enter the world, and nothing would ever be the same. I'm scared, she admitted to Dominic, gripping his hand hard enough to hurt. I know. I'm terrified too. He pressed his lips to her knuckles. But we're doing this together. You, me, and Sophia. We're ready for this. What if I'm not? What if I can't do this? You can. You're the bravest person I know. Dominic's eyes were fierce with conviction. You disappeared into hiding pregnant and alone because you thought it was best for our daughter. You built a life from nothing in a strange city. You gave me a second chance even after I'd broken your heart. Isabella, if you can do all that, you can absolutely do this. The doctor interrupted their moment. All right, Isabella, with the next contraction, I need you to push. Dad, you can support her back and count to 10. The pushing phase was brutal, despite the epidural, an exhausting marathon that required every ounce of strength Isabella had left. Dominic counted through each push, his voice steady and encouraging even as Isabella crushed his hand and screamed through the effort. Time lost meaning. The world narrowed to the doctor's instructions, Dominic's counting, and the overwhelming need to bring their daughter safely into the world. I can see the head, the doctor announced. One more big push, Isabella. You're almost there. Isabella bore down with everything she had left. Dominic's voice in her ear saying, I love you, you're amazing, just one more, you can do this. And then suddenly the pressure released and a cry filled the room. Not her own cry, but something smaller, angrier, absolutely perfect. It's a girl, the doctor announced unnecessarily, placing a tiny, squirming, beautiful creature on Isabella's chest. Sophia Rose Romano Castellano had arrived. Isabella stared at her daughter through tears that blurred everything into impressionistic smears of color and light. Sophia was perfect, all pink skin and dark hair and impossibly tiny fingers that grasped at air. Her cry was strong and indignant, letting the world know she'd arrived and was not particularly happy about the transition. Hello, baby girl, Isabella whispered, her voice breaking. Hello, Sophia. We've been waiting for you. Beside her, Dominic was completely undone. Tears streamed down his face as he stared at his daughter, one hand gently touching her impossibly small head while the other still held Isabella's. She's perfect, Isabella. She's absolutely perfect. Would you like to cut the cord, Dad? The doctor asked. Dominic looked to Isabella for permission. She nodded, and he moved to perform the task with hands that trembled slightly. When it was done, he returned to Isabella's side, leaning down to kiss her forehead with reverence. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for her. Thank you for giving me this chance. Thank you for being so incredibly strong. The next hour passed in a blur of newborn tests and measurements, while Isabella delivered the placenta and the medical team ensured both mother and baby were healthy. Sophia weighed 6 pounds, 9 ounces, and measured 19 inches long. Her APGAR scores were excellent. She was, according to every metric the doctors could measure, absolutely perfect. Finally, cleaned and swaddled, Sophia was returned to Isabella's arms. Dominic settled carefully onto the bed beside them, creating a small family cocoon in the hospital room while Chicago woke up outside their window. Sophia had stopped crying, her dark blue eyes struggling to focus on the faces above her. She has your nose, Isabella observed, tracing one finger along Sophia's tiny features. And your chin, your beautiful mouth. Dominic touched their daughter with the same reverence he'd shown Isabella, like Sophia was made of spun glass and might shatter under careless handling. I can't believe she's real, that we made this perfect little person. Are you glad? Isabella asked softly. Truly glad. With no regrets? Dominic turned to look at her fully, his eyes still wet with tears. Isabella, this is the best moment of my entire life. Every choice I made, every path I took, every mistake and triumph, all of it led here, to you and Sophia. How could I possibly regret any of it? Even the months I was gone? Even the pain of searching? Even that. Because it taught me what matters. Taught me that all the power and money in the world means nothing without people to share it with. He kissed Isabella gently, careful not to jostle their daughter. I love you both so much it terrifies me. But I wouldn't trade this terror for anything. A knock interrupted the moment. The nurse poked her head in with an apologetic smile. Sorry to disturb, but there's a gentleman outside who's very insistent about seeing Mr. Castellano. Says his name is Marco. Dominic's eyebrows rose. Marco's here? Apparently he flew in this morning when he got your text about the baby. Should I send him away? No, let him in. Dominic looked to Isabella. If that's all right with you? Isabella was too exhausted and happy to care about visitors. Of course. Marco entered cautiously, a massive bouquet of flowers in his arms, and uncertainty written across his usually confident features. Boss, I hope this isn't intrusive. I just wanted to... He stopped dead when he saw Dominic on the bed with Isabella, both of them holding the newborn. Holy hell, that's a baby. An actual baby. Very observant, Dominic said dryly, but his smile was genuine. Marco, meet Sophia Rose Romano Castellano. Sophia, this is your Uncle Marco, who's going to spoil you absolutely rotten. Marco set down the flowers and approached slowly, peering at Sophia with the wariness of someone who'd never been around infants. She's so small. Are they supposed to be that small? She's perfectly normal-sized, Isabella assured him, amused by his obvious discomfort. Can I... Marco gestured awkwardly. Is it okay if I hold her? Dominic and Isabella exchanged a glance. Finally, Dominic carefully lifted Sophia and placed her in Marco's arms, showing him how to support her head. Marco froze, his expression shifting from uncertain to awed. She's perfect, he said softly. Boss, she's absolutely perfect. I know. Dominic's voice carried quiet pride. Marco looked between Dominic and Isabella, something like relief crossing his features. I'm glad you two worked things out, really glad. The past few months watching you search for her, watching you fall apart. He stopped, clearly uncomfortable with the emotion. I'm just glad you're both here, together, with this perfect little person. Thank you for covering things in New York, Dominic said. I know I've been absent more than present lately. It's been good for me. Good for the organization, actually. Turns out I'm more capable than either of us gave me credit for. Marco gently returned Sophia to Isabella's arms. And boss, I meant what I said about the transition. I'm ready to take over as CEO. You focus on your family. Let me handle the empire. The words carried weight beyond their simple meaning. This was Marco releasing Dominic from the burden he'd carried for decades, giving him permission to prioritize family over power. It was a gift of immeasurable value. Thank you, Dominic said quietly, for everything. Marco nodded, understanding passing between them. I'll leave you three alone. But Isabella, if you need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. Consider me permanently on Sophia duty. After Marco left, Isabella turned to Dominic with raised eyebrows. Uncle Marco, huh? That's going to be interesting. He'll be good with her, protective. And he's right. I need to let go of day-to-day operations. Dominic settled back beside Isabella, one arm around her shoulders, while they both watched Sophia sleep. This is more important. You two are more important than anything else. They stayed like that for a long time, exhaustion pulling at them both, but neither willing to miss a moment of their daughter's first hours. Finally, Isabella's eyes began to drift closed despite her best efforts. Sleep, Dominic urged gently. I'll watch her. I'll wake you when she needs to eat. You need sleep too. I'll sleep later. Right now I just want to memorize every detail of this moment. He kissed her temple. Rest, Isabella. I've got you both. Isabella let her eyes close, feeling safe, in a way she hadn't since before she'd fled New York. Dominic was here. Sophia was here. They were together, a family forged through pain and fear, but stronger for having survived it. When Isabella woke 3 hours later, she found Dominic exactly where she'd left him, sitting beside the bed with Sophia cradled in his arms, watching their daughter sleep with an expression of such profound love that it made Isabella's chest ache. "You didn't sleep at all, did you?" she asked softly. Dominic looked up, smiling. "Couldn't, she's too fascinating. Did you know she makes these tiny sounds when she dreams? And her fingers grip onto my thumb like she's afraid I'll disappear if she lets go. She's perfect." "She's perfect," Dominic agreed. He stood carefully and brought Sophia to Isabella. "She's starting to root. I think she's hungry." The first attempt at breastfeeding was awkward and frustrating, but eventually Sophia latched on with the determination she'd inherited from both parents. Isabella looked down at her daughter, then up at Dominic, watching them both with devotion written across every line of his face, and felt her heart expand with a love so overwhelming it was almost painful. This was everything she'd been afraid to hope for. Everything she'd thought she'd lost when she'd overheard those devastating words outside Dominic's office. But they'd fought through the pain and fear and built something real, something lasting. "What are you thinking?" Dominic asked, settling beside them again. "That I'm glad I gave you another chance. That I'm terrified and exhausted and happier than I've ever been in my life." Isabella leaned into his warmth. "That we actually did it. We made a family." "We did." Dominic wrapped his arms around both of them, creating a protective circle. "And I promise you, Isabella, I will spend every day proving I deserve this. Deserve you both. No more mistakes, no more secrets. Just us, building a life together." Sophia finished eating and promptly fell asleep, milk-drunk and content. Isabella handed her to Dominic, who settled their daughter against his chest with the natural ease he'd developed over the past hour. Watching him hold Sophia, this powerful man reduced to tender protectiveness by 6 pounds of newborn, Isabella felt the last of her walls finally crumble. "I trust you," she said quietly, "completely. I trust you with our daughter, and with my heart, and with our future." Dominic's eyes met hers, understanding the significance of those words. Trust was the thing Isabella had been withholding, the final barrier between them. Now she was offering it freely, a gift more precious than anything else she could give. "I won't waste it," he promised. "I swear to you, Isabella, I will never give you reason to regret trusting me." The sun was rising over Chicago now, painting their hospital room in shades of pink and gold. A new day, a new beginning. And curled between them, Sophia Rose slept peacefully, unaware that she'd already changed the world simply by existing. Outside the hospital room, the world continued turning, businesses running, empires expanding, power shifting hands. But inside that small space, nothing else mattered except the 3 people who'd found each other against impossible odds. A family built from secrets and pain and love strong enough to survive both. A family that would face whatever came next together. They left the hospital 3 days later, stepping into brilliant September sunshine, with Sophia bundled in Dominic's arms like she was made of the most precious materials on earth. Isabella moved carefully beside them, still recovering from labor, but glowing with a happiness that transformed her entire presence. The car Dominic had arranged was waiting at the curb. Not the sleek town car he would have chosen months ago, but a sensible SUV with a properly installed infant car seat that he'd researched obsessively. "I still can't believe they just let us leave with her," Isabella said, as Dominic carefully secured Sophia into the car seat with the focused intensity of someone defusing a bomb. "No test, no certification. They just hand you a whole human being and say good luck. We've read 17 books on infant care and watched approximately 40 hours of instructional videos," Dominic reminded her, adjusting the straps for the 3rd time. "We're as prepared as it's possible to be. That's what terrifies me. We're as prepared as possible, and I still have no idea what I'm doing." Dominic finished with the car seat and turned to help Isabella into the front passenger seat, his hand gentle on her elbow. "Then we'll figure it out together, just like everything else." The drive to their Chicago apartment was nerve-wracking, Dominic driving with exaggerated caution while checking the rearview mirror every 30 seconds to make sure Sophia was still breathing. She slept through the entire journey, completely oblivious to her parents' anxiety. The apartment felt different when they walked through the door, the same space they'd been living in for weeks, but transformed by the tiny presence now entering it for the first time. The nursery was ready, painted a soft sage green with white furniture and a mobile of stars hanging above the crib. Isabella's mother had sent blankets and clothes despite the distance, including a hand-knitted yellow sweater that was currently 2 sizes too large but achingly beautiful. "Home," Isabella said softly, looking around with Sophia now cradled in her arms. "Our home." "For now," Dominic said carefully. "But Isabella, we need to talk about New York." He saw her tense, the old wariness flickering across her features. "Already? She's 3 days old." "I know. And I'm not pushing you to leave tomorrow or even next month. But we need to make plans." Dominic moved closer, keeping his voice gentle. "Marco's taking over as CEO next week. I have properties in New York that need to be prepared if we're all moving back together. And there are security considerations with Sophia that I can't ignore." Isabella sank onto the couch, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "What kind of security considerations?" "The kind that come with being my daughter." Dominic sat beside her, careful not to crowd. "Isabella, I've made enemies over the years. People who would see Sophia as a weakness to exploit, a way to get to me. In Chicago, we're relatively anonymous. In New York, everyone knows who I am. The moment it becomes public knowledge that I have a daughter, she becomes a target." "Tut." Fear flickered across Isabella's face as she looked down at Sophia sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I hadn't thought about that, about the danger." "I have. Constantly." Dominic reached out to stroke Sophia's downy hair. "Which is why I've already arranged for a property that can be secured properly. Not the penthouse, somewhere with actual outdoor space where Sophia can play safely. A home, not just an apartment." "You bought a house?" "I had Marco look at several options. But I wanted to wait until you could see them before making a final decision." Dominic pulled out his tablet, bringing up photos of 3 different properties. "This isn't me making unilateral choices. This is me presenting options for us to decide together." Isabella studied the photos. A brownstone in the Upper West Side, a townhouse in Brooklyn Heights, and an estate in Westchester with enough land that Sophia could run free without ever leaving the property. All 3 were beautiful, clearly expensive, and completely foreign to the life Isabella had built for herself before Dominic. "These are all so much," she said quietly, "so far from where I grew up, from anything I know." "I know, and if you hate them all, we'll find something else, something that feels right to you." Dominic set the tablet aside. "But Isabella, I need you to understand I can't protect you and Sophia without certain resources. A secure property with trained security staff. Background checks on anyone who comes into regular contact with our daughter. Protocols for travel and public appearances. You're talking about raising her in a fortress. I'm talking about keeping her safe while still giving her as normal a childhood as possible." Dominic's voice carried the weight of old pain. "My mother died because my father didn't take security seriously enough, because he thought keeping his family separate from his business was protection enough. I won't make that mistake." Isabella looked at him sharply. "You never talk about your mother's death, not in detail. Because it's not a memory I revisit willingly." Dominic stood, moving to the window where Chicago sprawled in the distance. "But you deserve to know. You deserve to understand why I'm so adamant about this." He was quiet for a long moment, gathering the words he'd spent decades avoiding. Finally, he spoke. "I was 15. My father had just concluded a deal that another family thought should have been theirs. They took my mother from the grocery store parking lot in broad daylight. Held her for 3 days while they negotiated terms with my father." Isabella's sharp intake of breath was audible, but Dominic continued, needing to finish now that he'd started. "He gave them everything they asked for: territory, money, public acknowledgement that they'd won. They released my mother, and he thought it was over. Thought paying the price meant we were safe." "But it wasn't over," Isabella whispered. "It wasn't over. They'd made their point, that my father would sacrifice anything for his family, that we were his weakness. So 2 weeks later, they came for her again. This time they weren't interested in negotiation. They shot her in our driveway while I watched from my bedroom window. Made sure I saw it. Made sure my father knew that loving someone meant giving your enemies unlimited power over you." Dominic turned back to face Isabella, his expression carefully controlled despite the emotion churning beneath. My father never recovered. He died 6 months later, threw himself into increasingly reckless situations until one of them killed him. Everyone said it was business as usual, but I knew better. He was looking for death because living without her was unbearable. Tears streamed down Isabella's face. Dominic, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I never told you. Never told anyone except Marco. He moved back to sit beside her, his voice dropping to something raw and honest. That's why I said those things about children being liabilities. Why I convinced myself I could never have a family. Because I saw what loving someone cost my father, saw what it cost my mother, and I swore I would never give anyone that kind of power over me. But you changed your mind. I didn't change my mind. I fell in love with you and realized I'd already given you that power whether I admitted it or not. Dominic cupped her face gently. The day you disappeared, the months I spent searching, the terror when we thought something might be wrong with the pregnancy, I already knew what my father felt. Already understood that loving you meant accepting that losing you would destroy me. Isabella shifted Sophia into one arm so she could reach for Dominic with the other, pulling him close. You won't lose us. I won't let that happen. Neither will I. Which is why I need you to let me implement proper security. Dominic pressed his forehead to hers. Not to control you or limit your freedom, but to make sure that what happened to my mother never happens to you or Sophia. Please, Isabella, let me protect you both properly. Isabella pulled back to look into his eyes, seeing the fear and determination there. This wasn't about power or control. This was about a 15-year-old boy who'd watched his mother die and spent his life trying to prevent that trauma from repeating. How could she deny him the peace of mind that came from knowing his family was protected? Okay, she said softly. We'll do it your way. Security, protocols, whatever you think is necessary. But Dominic, you have to promise me that Sophia gets to be a child, that we don't lock her away from the world because we're afraid of what might happen. I promise. She'll go to parks and playgrounds and eventually school. She'll have friends and birthday parties and all the normal childhood experiences. Dominic's relief was palpable. Just with trained security making sure nothing threatens her while she's doing it. Then show me the houses. Let's pick one together and start planning our move back to New York. Over the next week, they settled into the exhausting rhythm of new parenthood. Sophia woke every 2 hours wanting to eat, her cries piercing the quiet apartment with surprising volume for such a small creature. Isabella handled the feeding while Dominic took over diaper changes and the complicated process of soothing their daughter back to sleep. They were both constantly exhausted, moving through the days in a fog of sleep deprivation that made everything feel slightly surreal. But there was joy in it too. The way Sophia's tiny hand gripped Dominic's finger, the soft sounds she made while sleeping, the moments when her unfocused eyes seemed to recognize her parents' faces. I think she smiled at me, Dominic announced one morning, cradling Sophia against his chest, while Isabella attempted to shower for the first time in 3 days. She's 2 weeks old, Isabella called from the bathroom. That was probably gas. It was definitely a smile. She knows her father when she sees him. Isabella emerged wearing one of Dominic's shirts over leggings, her damp hair pulled into a messy bun. You're completely delusional from lack of sleep. Maybe, but I'm a happy delusion. Dominic looked up from their daughter to smile at Isabella. Have I mentioned that you're amazing? 'Cause you are. Growing her, birthing her, feeding her from your own body. Isabella, you're the most incredible person I've ever known. I'm the most exhausted person you've ever known, Isabella corrected, but she was smiling, though I appreciate the sentiment. I'm serious. I watch you with her and I'm in awe constantly. Dominic stood carefully, bringing Sophia to Isabella. She's lucky to have you as her mother. We're both lucky. Isabella took their daughter, settling into the rocking chair they'd placed near the window. I never thought I'd have this. A family, someone who loves me the way you do. Get used to it. You're stuck with me now. The words were light, but the emotion beneath them was serious. They'd been through fire to get here, months of separation, fear, pain, and slow reconstruction of trust. But they'd emerged stronger for it, their love tempered into something that could withstand whatever challenges came next. 2 weeks after Sophia's birth, Marco video called with news from New York. His face appeared on Dominic's laptop screen, looking exhausted but satisfied. The transition is complete. I'm officially CEO as of this morning. The board voted unanimously. Congratulations, Dominic said, bouncing Sophia gently while Isabella slept on the couch behind him. You've earned it. Thanks, boss. Or I guess I shouldn't call you that anymore. Marco's expression turned serious. There's something else. Vincent Moretti called. Wants to arrange a meeting when you're back in New York. Says it's important. Dominic's instincts immediately went on alert. Did he say what it's about? No, but he specifically mentioned bringing your family. Said this concerns all of you. That was unusual. Vincent Moretti didn't make requests lightly, and involving family and business discussions was rare. Tell him I'll be in touch once we're settled back in New York. We're planning to move in the next few weeks. About that? The Westchester property you were interested in? The owners accepted your offer. House is yours once you sign the paperwork. Dominic glanced at the sleeping Isabella, remembering the way her eyes had lit up when she'd seen the photos of the Westchester estate. It had space for Sophia to grow, grounds extensive enough to be secured properly, and proximity to excellent schools for the future. They'd decided together, spending an entire evening discussing the pros and cons while Sophia slept between them. Perfect. Have the lawyers draw up everything. We'll sign remotely and arrange the move for next month. After Marco disconnected, Dominic sat quietly holding his daughter while his mind worked through logistics. Moving an infant, establishing security protocols, preparing the house, setting up the nursery in their new home. The list of tasks was extensive. But underlying all of it was a thread of excitement. They were going home. Not to his penthouse or Isabella's old apartment, but to a real home they'd chosen together. A place where Sophia could grow up safe and loved. What are you thinking about so seriously? Isabella's sleepy voice came from the couch. How much I love you, how perfect our daughter is. How lucky I am that you gave me a second chance. Dominic moved to sit beside her, carefully transferring Sophia to Isabella's arms. Marco called. The Westchester house is ours. Isabella's tired face brightened. Really? We got it? We got it. We can move next month if you're ready. I'm ready. Isabella looked down at Sophia, then back at Dominic. I'm ready to start our life together, properly, this time. No more secrets, no more hiding. No more secrets, Dominic agreed. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, his heart suddenly hammering against his ribs. Which is why I'm not hiding this anymore. Isabella's eyes widened as he opened the box, revealing a ring. A simple platinum band with 3 stones, elegant rather than ostentatious. Dominic, I bought this the day after I found you in Chicago, carried it with me every day since, waiting for the right moment. He took the ring from the box, holding it carefully. But I'm done waiting for perfect moments, Isabella. I'm done overthinking and calculating. I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? Tears spilled down Isabella's cheeks, but she was smiling. You're proposing while I'm wearing your old shirt and haven't washed my hair in 2 days, and our daughter is literally between us making extremely undignified sounds. I'm proposing because this is us, real and imperfect and absolutely right. Dominic's voice was steady despite his racing heart. So what do you say, Isabella Romano? Will you marry me? Yes. The word came out choked with emotion. Yes. Absolutely yes. Dominic slipped the ring onto her finger, the fit perfect because he'd stolen one of her old rings to get the sizing right. Then he kissed her carefully, mindful of Sophia sleeping between them, and felt something settle into place in his chest. This was everything he'd told himself he could never have, everything he'd been too afraid to reach for. And it was his. Theirs. A family built from ashes and fear and love strong enough to survive both. The move to New York happened 6 weeks after Sophia's birth, coordinated with the military precision Dominic had once applied to hostile takeovers. Professional movers packed their Chicago apartment while Isabella supervised with Sophia, strapped to her chest in a carrier, offering instructions about which boxes were essential and which could wait. Dominic handled the logistics of the private plane that would carry them home, ensuring every detail was arranged for traveling with an infant. The Westchester estate was ready when they arrived. Nursery painted and furnished exactly to Isabella's specifications, security team briefed and positioned discreetly, kitchen stocked with everything they might need. Marco met them at the door with a grin and an armful of gifts for Sofia. "Welcome home," he said, stepping aside so they could enter. "Mrs. Castellano, the house looks amazing. You have excellent taste." "We're not married yet," Isabella corrected, but she was smiling. "And thank you. Does look wonderful." The wedding happened 2 months later in a small ceremony at the estate, attended by close family and the few friends who'd proven trustworthy over the years. Isabella wore a simple cream dress that accommodated her post-pregnancy body, her hair loose and adorned with flowers. Dominic wore a tailored suit and an expression of such profound joy that several guests commented they'd never seen him smile like that. Sofia attended in a white lace dress, passed between various relatives who competed for time holding her. She slept through most of the ceremony, waking only to cry during the vows, a moment that made everyone laugh and somehow made the whole thing feel more real, more perfectly imperfect. "I, Dominic Castellano, take you, Isabella Romano, to be my wife," Dominic said, his voice carrying clearly despite Sofia's protests in the front row. "I promise to love you through every challenge and celebrate every joy, to be your partner in all things, to trust you with my heart and my fears and my dreams, to build a life with you that's worthy of the love you've shown me." Isabella's vows were equally heartfelt, delivered with tears streaming down her face, while Sofia's grandmother attempted to soothe the crying infant. "I promise to trust you with my whole heart, even when fear tries to build walls between us. To meet every challenge as partners rather than adversaries. To build a family with you that's stronger for the struggles we've survived." When the officiant pronounced them married, Dominic kissed Isabella with a tenderness that made several guests reach for tissues. And when they turned to face their small gathering as husband and wife, Sofia finally stopped crying and made a small cooing sound that could have been approval or gas, but everyone chose to interpret as blessing. The reception was simple, elegant, filled with laughter and good food and toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilarious. Marco gave a speech about watching Dominic transform from ruthless businessman to devoted father, concluding with, "I never thought I'd see the day when Dominic Castellano changed a diaper at 3 a.m. But here we are. Love really does conquer all." Vincent Moretti approached during the dancing, his aged face creased in a genuine smile. "Congratulations, Dominic. Your mother would have been proud to see you so happy." "Thank you, Vincent." Dominic shook the older man's hand firmly. "Marco mentioned you wanted to meet, about something involving my family?" "Not business, something better." Vincent's eyes twinkled. "I wanted to tell you in person that I'm retiring, really retiring this time, not the half measures I've attempted before. And I wanted you to know why." Dominic waited, curious despite himself. "Because I watched you choose family over empire, and it reminded me of what matters. My Rosa and I have grandchildren we barely know because I've been too busy maintaining power I no longer need." Vincent glanced at where Isabella danced with Sofia in her arms. "You were right to step back. Right to prioritize love over fear. I'm following your example while I still have time." The admission from the old crime boss was surprising and oddly touching. "I'm glad," Dominic said sincerely. "You deserve peace, Vincent. You've earned it." "So have you. Congratulations on finding it." Vincent patted his shoulder and moved away, leaving Dominic to rejoin his wife on the dance floor. "What did Vincent want?" Isabella asked, swaying gently with Sofia drowsing against her shoulder. "To tell us we made the right choice, that family matters more than power." Dominic wrapped his arms around both of them, creating the protective circle that had become their signature embrace. "He's right. This, you and Sofia, this is everything." The seasons changed, bringing winter snow that blanketed their Westchester property in pristine white. Sofia grew with astonishing speed, going from a tiny newborn to a chunky 3-month-old who smiled at her parents with genuine recognition and delight. She was an easy baby, relatively speaking, sleeping in reasonable stretches, happy to be held by anyone willing to offer arms, fascinated by the mobile above her crib. Dominic and Isabella settled into their roles as parents with increasing confidence. The terror of the early days faded into comfortable routine. They took turns with night feedings, tag-team diaper changes, and developed an efficient system for managing the endless laundry that somehow accompanied such a small person. I can't believe how much our life has changed in less than a year, Isabella said one snowy evening, watching Dominic play with Sophia on a blanket spread across their living room floor. Last winter I was alone in that terrible Chicago apartment, terrified and convinced I'd never see you again. And now you're stuck with me forever, Dominic said, making exaggerated faces at Sophia until she giggled. No escape. No escape, Isabella agreed, settling onto the floor beside them. Though I'm not sure you got the better end of this deal. I come with extensive baggage and a daughter who will definitely inherit my stubborn streak. She already has it. Watch. Dominic tried to take away the rattle Sophia was gripping. She held on with surprising strength, her face scrunching into determined resistance that made both parents laugh. See? Stubborn as her mother, and as protective as her father. Isabella stroked Sophia's dark hair, marveling at how much she looked like Dominic. She's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Good. The world needs more strong women who know their worth. Dominic looked at Isabella with love so clear it still made her breath catch. Women like her mother. They stayed on the floor until Sophia fell asleep between them, both parents reluctant to move her to the crib and end the perfect moment. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing their home in peaceful silence. Inside, warmth and love created a sanctuary that felt impervious to anything the outside world might throw at them. When Sophia turned 6 months old, they threw a celebration that doubled as a housewarming party, inviting the carefully vetted circle of friends and family who'd become their support system. The house filled with laughter and chaos as Sophia was passed between admirers, showing off her newest skill, sitting up unsupported, with obvious pride. Isabella's mother cornered Dominic in the kitchen, her expression serious despite the festive atmosphere. I want to thank you, she said without preamble, for making my daughter happy, for being the man she needed you to be. I'm the one who should thank you, Dominic replied, for raising a woman strong enough to give me a second chance, for not having me killed when you found out I was the reason she disappeared. Isabella's mother laughed. I considered it, but then I saw how you looked at her in the hospital, how you held Sophia like she was made of glass, and I knew. You're one of the good ones, even if it took you a while to figure it out. It did take me a while, Dominic admitted. Too long, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. See that you don't. Because if you hurt my daughter again, CEO or not, I know people. The threat was delivered with a sweet smile that made it somehow more menacing. Dominic believed every word. Understood. As the party wound down and guests departed, Dominic and Isabella found themselves alone in the nursery, watching Sophia sleep after her exciting day. The room was perfect. Soft colors and gentle light, every detail chosen with love and care. But more than the physical space, it represented something profound. This was the life they'd built from pain and fear and determination. This was the family Dominic had thought impossible and Isabella had been brave enough to fight for. Thank you, Dominic said softly, not wanting to wake Sophia but needing to say the words. For what? For running when you needed to. For coming back when I asked. For trusting me enough to build this life together. He wrapped his arms around Isabella from behind, both of them watching their daughter sleep. For giving me everything I was too afraid to want. Isabella leaned back into his embrace, her hands covering his where they rested on her stomach. Thank you for proving me wrong, for showing me that the man I fell in love with was real, not just a fantasy I'd created. Oh, that man was never real, too controlled, too afraid, too convinced that power mattered more than love. Dominic pressed a kiss to her temple. This version, the one who changes diapers and researches sleep training methods and cries during children's movies. This is who I actually am. You helped me find him. They stood like that for a long time, watching Sophia sleep and counting their blessings. Outside, the world continued its complicated spin. Businesses competing, power shifting, the machinery of life grinding forward. But inside their home, none of that mattered. Here there was only love and trust, and the profound peace that came from choosing the right priorities. The years unfolded with surprising speed. Sophia took her first steps at 10 months, her determined expression making both parents laugh even as they worried she'd fall. She spoke her first word at 11 months, Dada, which Dominic insisted was clear evidence of her superior intelligence, while Isabella rolled her eyes and reminded him that Dada was easier to pronounce than Mama. By 18 months, Sophia was a whirlwind of energy and personality, fearless in her exploration of their extensive grounds, while security teams watched discreetly from a distance. She had Dominic's dark eyes and commanding presence, Isabella's delicate features and stubborn determination. She was, everyone agreed, the perfect combination of both parents. "We should have another one," Dominic said one evening, watching Sophia toddle after the estate's very patient dog. Isabella looked at him in surprise. "Another baby? Why not? We're good at this. Sophia could use a sibling, and I want a house full of children." Dominic pulled Isabella close, his hand resting on her flat stomach. A whole tribe of little Castellanos running around causing beautiful chaos. "You've gone completely soft," Isabella accused, but she was smiling. The man who once said children were liabilities now wants a tribe of them. "I've evolved, adapted to new information." He kissed her slowly, thoroughly. "So what do you say? Ready to do this again?" Isabella thought about the sleepless nights, the exhaustion, the complete upheaval that came with a newborn. Then she thought about Sophia's laugh, her tiny hands gripping their fingers, the overwhelming love that made every difficult moment worthwhile. "Yes," she said finally. "Let's have another baby." The second pregnancy was announced 6 months later, greeted with excitement from Sophia, who had no real understanding of what a sibling meant, and joy from their extended family. This time, there was no fear or uncertainty. Isabella sailed through the pregnancy with Dominic's full support, comfortable in the knowledge that they were partners in all things. Their son was born on a warm spring morning, arriving with less drama than his sister but equal perfection. They named him Alessandro Dominic Romano Castellano, and he had Isabella's lighter coloring and Dominic's serious expression even as a newborn. Sophia was initially skeptical of the squirming bundle that had invaded her territory, but within weeks she'd appointed herself his fierce protector, insisting on helping with every aspect of his care. Watching his daughter gently pat her brother's back while he slept, Dominic felt his heart expand with a love so profound it was almost painful. "2 children," Isabella said one night, both of them exhausted as Alessandro nursed while Sophia sprawled across Dominic's lap, asleep after a long day of helping. "We have 2 perfect children and a life I never dreamed possible." 3, Dominic corrected. 3 what? 3 children. Eventually? Maybe 4. He grinned at Isabella's expression. "What? We make beautiful babies together. Why stop at 2? "Because I need to sleep at some point in the next decade," Isabella said, but she was laughing. "Let's survive these 2 first, then we'll discuss expanding the tribe." They never did have that 3rd or 4th child. 2 was enough to keep their lives full and chaotic and perfect. But the hypothetical discussions became a running joke between them, Dominic periodically suggesting they should try for a 3rd, while Isabella reminded him that sleep was precious and their family was already complete. The children grew, filling their house with laughter and noise and the kind of beautiful chaos that only young children can create. Sophia started school, making friends with the careful supervision of security teams who'd learned to blend into the background. Alessandro followed in her footsteps, equally outgoing and confident. Dominic stepped fully away from day-to-day business operations, transitioning into an advisory role that required minimal time and allowed maximum presence for his family. He coached Sophia's soccer team, taught Alessandro to play chess, and spent his afternoons in ways that would have shocked his younger self, attending school plays, hosting playdates, building elaborate blanket forts. "You're completely unrecognizable from the man I met in that Manhattan office," Marco observed during one visit, watching Dominic referee a heated game of tag between his children and Marco's own young son. "Good," Dominic replied, catching Sophia as she barreled into him at full speed. That man was missing everything important. Isabella overheard from where she sat with Marco's wife, both women, watching their husbands play with the children. "He really has changed completely," she said softly. "Sometimes I can barely remember the cold, controlled man from those early days." "Do you miss it? The excitement, the danger?" "Not even a little bit." Isabella's answer was immediate and certain. "This," she gestured at their children playing, at Dominic's uninhibited laughter as Alessandro climbed onto his back. "This is everything I ever wanted. The rest was just surviving until I found my way here." On their 5th wedding anniversary, Dominic surprised Isabella with a trip to Italy. Just the two of them, while Sofia and Alessandro stayed with Isabella's mother. It was their first real vacation without children, a week of sleeping late and leisurely meals and remembering what it felt like to be just a couple rather than exhausted parents. "I want to renew our vows," Dominic said one evening over dinner in a small Roman restaurant, the Colosseum visible through the window behind him. "We've only been married 5 years, Isabella pointed out. "That seems premature for vow renewal. I don't care about timing. I want to make those promises again, with the understanding that comes from actually living them." Dominic took her hand across the table. "When we got married, we were still learning to trust each other, still healing from the pain of separation. Now we know what we're promising. I want to say those words again with complete certainty." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. "You really are the most romantic man I've ever known. Only for you." Dominic's thumb traced circles on her palm. "So, what do you say? Will you marry me again?" "Yes, always yes." They renewed their vows on the estate grounds 6 months later, surrounded by friends and family, while Sofia and Alessandro served as ring bearer and flower girl, roles they took with extreme seriousness. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt, and considerably less chaotic than their first wedding, now that both children were old enough to sit quietly. "I, Dominic Castellano, take you again, Isabella Romano Castellano, to be my wife," Dominic said, his voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes. "I promise to choose you every day, in every moment, for the rest of our lives. To be the man you deserve and the father our children need. To build with you a life worth living and a love worth celebrating." Isabella's vows echoed his sentiment, adding, "Thank you for being brave enough to change, strong enough to admit when you were wrong, and loving enough to give me everything I never dared to ask for." When they kissed, Sofia announced loudly that it was gross, while Alessandro giggled, and everyone laughed at the perfect imperfection of the moment. The years continued their march forward, bringing new challenges and joys in equal measure. Dominic's transition away from active business leadership became complete when Marco bought out his remaining shares, making the separation official. Some in their world whispered that Dominic had gone soft, that he'd lost his edge. Those people didn't understand that Dominic had found something infinitely more valuable than power. He'd found purpose. His days were spent in ways that would have baffled his younger self. Parent-teacher conferences, Little League games, dance recitals where Sofia performed with earnest concentration, teaching Alessandro to ride a bike, running beside him with a hand on the seat until the boy found his balance and took off on his own. "I'm living the life my father never got to have," Dominic told Isabella one evening, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set in shades of amber and rose. The peaceful years he was robbed of. Every moment with them feels like honoring his memory by choosing differently. "He'd be proud of you," Isabella said, leaning against his shoulder. "Your mother, too. They'd love seeing you like this, happy, at peace, surrounded by family." "I hope so." Dominic wrapped his arm around her. "Though I think they'd be most proud of the woman who made this possible, who was brave enough to run when she needed to and strong enough to come back. Who gave me a second chance I definitely didn't deserve." "You earned it," Isabella corrected. "Every day you earn it." When Sofia turned 13, she came to them with questions about Dominic's past, having heard rumors at her private school about her father's history. Dominic and Isabella had been preparing for this conversation, knowing it was inevitable, but dreading it nonetheless. They told her the truth, age-appropriate but honest, about the world Dominic had operated in, the choices he'd made, the reasons he'd stepped away, about how her mother had disappeared and why, about the fear and pain that had preceded the family they'd built. Sofia listened with serious attention, her dark eyes, so like Dominic's, processing everything. Finally, she said, "So you used to be bad, but you're good now?" The simplification made both parents want to laugh and cry simultaneously. "It's more complicated than that," Dominic said carefully. "I did things I'm not proud of. Hurt people, made choices based on power instead of principle. But yes, I'm trying to be better now, to be the man your mother and you kids deserve." "You are," Sofia said with the certainty of youth. "You're the best dad anyone could have. Who cares what you did before I was born? The unconditional acceptance from his daughter hit Dominic harder than any threat ever had. He pulled Sophia into a hug, holding her tight while she squirmed and complained that he was being embarrassing. But she hugged him back, her thin arms strong around his neck, and Dominic sent up silent thanks for the second chance that had led here. Alessandro asked similar questions at 10 and received similar answers adjusted for his age and temperament. Both children accepted their father's past as exactly that, past, separate from the present reality of bedtime stories and soccer practice and unconditional love. On what would have been Dominic's mother's 75th birthday, he took Isabella and the children to visit her grave, something he'd avoided for years but felt ready to face finally. They left roses, and Dominic introduced his mother to the family she'd never met. "I wish you could have known them," he said quietly, kneeling at the headstone while Sophia and Alessandro picked wildflowers nearby. "Wish you could have held Sophia and Alessandro, could have met Isabella and seen how happy she makes me, but I think you'd be proud of how we've lived, of the family we've built." Isabella's hand on his shoulder was warm and grounding. "She knows," she said softly. "Wherever she is, she knows, and she's proud." The visit brought unexpected peace. Dominic had carried guilt for decades, for not being able to save his mother, for choosing a path that would have disappointed her, for taking so long to find his way to a better life. But kneeling at her grave with his wife and children around him, he felt that guilt transform into gratitude. Gratitude for the life she'd given him, for the lessons she'd taught in her too brief time, for the example that had ultimately guided him home. Years passed with the strange acceleration that comes with raising children. Sophia grew into a thoughtful teenager with her mother's compassion and her father's strategic mind. Alessandro developed a talent for music, filling their home with piano melodies and guitar chords. Both children thrived in their secure, loving environment, unaware of how rare such stability was, how hard their parents had fought to create it. On their 15th anniversary, Dominic and Isabella stood on their balcony watching the sunset paint their property in shades of gold. From downstairs came the sound of Sophia practicing a speech for debate team, while Alessandro worked through a complicated piano piece, both children absorbed in their own pursuits. "We did it," Isabella said softly. "Built the life we promised each other." "We're still building it," Dominic corrected, pulling her close. "Every day we're building it. Do you ever regret it? Stepping away from power, from the empire you spent your life creating?" Dominic didn't even hesitate. "Never. Not once. That empire was built on fear and violence. This," he gestured at their home, at the sounds of their children living full, safe lives. "This is built on love. There's no comparison." Isabella turned in his arms to face him fully. "I love you, Dominic Castellano. I love the man you've become, and the life we've created, and every moment we've shared, even the painful ones that brought us here. I love you, Isabella Romano Castellano. You saved me from a life I thought was inevitable and showed me a better way. You're my entire world." They kissed as the sun completed its descent, the sky darkening into twilight while stars began to emerge. Inside, their children continued their activities, safe and loved, and blissfully unaware of the journey their parents had traveled to reach this moment. And Dominic, who had once built an empire on fear and control, who had sworn he would never allow himself the vulnerability of family, sent up silent thanks for the terrified woman who'd run away pregnant and the determination that had brought her back, for the second chance he'd barely deserved, and the love that had transformed everything. The house filled with light as Sophia turned on lamps and Alessandro called out asking what was for dinner. Dominic and Isabella went inside together, ready to face whatever came next as they'd faced everything since that hospital room in Chicago. Together, as partners, as family. The empire Dominic had built was gone, dismantled by choice, and replaced with something infinitely more valuable. A home filled with laughter, children who knew they were loved unconditionally, a wife who saw past the monster to the man beneath. And every night, when Dominic tucked his children into bed and kissed his wife goodnight, he knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. That power was nothing compared to love. That an empire built on fear crumbled into dust, but a family built on trust could weather any storm. This was his legacy now. Not territory or money or influence, but two beautiful children and a love story that had survived everything fear could throw at it. This was enough. This was everything.